The Prime Minister fires the unofficial start gun on his electoral campaign as he vows to restore pride in the United Kingdom in an address to the nation.
Well, good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 12th of January. This is Breakfast on GBNews with Isabel, Webster and Andrew Pearce.
Here's what's leading the news this morning.
I know this has been a tough winter. Our country faces some of the biggest challenges any of us will have seen in our lifetimes. With our economy, in our NHS, on our borders.
Rishi Sunak pledged to tackle illegal migration and NHS waiting lists in his first party political broadcast as Prime Minister. He also touted his record on fighting inflation, but he didn't mention the wave of strikes sweeping the country.
I think he should have. And in Parliament, MPs are demanding the suspended backbencher Andrew Britton should not be able to stand as an MP at the next general election. He compared the COVID vaccine rollout to the Holocaust.
Pregnant women and new mothers are being abandoned by the NHS, a new report has found. The shocking findings by the Care Quality Commission reveal that 4 in 10 women struggled to get help from staff whilst giving birth.
And food inflation is continuing to soar, so is eating more seasonal vegetables the key to saving money and the planet? We're going to speak to a couple flying the flag for British farming during this cost of living crisis.
And as ever, we love to hear from you. Get in touch the usual way via Twitter or email. Don't forget, let us know where you're watching or listening from. So our top story this morning, the Prime Minister has set out his main aims for 2023 in a party political broadcast that appears to signal a shift onto an election footing.
So Rishi Sunak reiterated what he called his hard-headed, common-sense approach to tackling the NHS backlog and the economy. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
Under my leadership, the government's priorities are your priorities, the people's priorities. Together, we're putting your needs above politics to repair the economy, strengthen our NHS, tackle illegal migration, and restore pride in the United Kingdom, our great country.
Well, joining us now for more on this and the other big political news of the day is the Deputy Editor of CapEx, Alice Denby. Welcome to the programme this morning, Alice. What did you make of this video? You know, characteristically slick and Rishi-esque, but sort of more interesting in what he didn't say than what he did.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of things he didn't talk about. I mean, frankly, the strikes that are affecting so many public services, the fact that it feels like in Britain nothing really works. I feel like he's here, whenever the next election is, it feels like he is setting himself some achievable targets that he hopes he can come to the public and say, look, here's what I've done. You know, I've done something for the economy, I've done something on waiting lists, and I've set in train these plans to tackle illegal migration. What's slightly concerning is that when he spoke to Parliament, I think last week, he had 5 priorities. He now seems to have 3. He was promising he was going to halve inflation. That seems to have dropped. So I'm not sure how reassured people are going to be about what he is actually going to be able to achieve ahead of whenever the next election might be.
Yeah, imagine if you were waiting for an ambulance yesterday. We've got another strike by ambulance crews. The Prime Minister talking about his pride in the nation and his priorities doesn't mention one of the first and most serious strikes in the NHS's history.
Yeah, and as you say, it was also yesterday that we had this legislation coming forward to ensure minimum service.
Yes, which they should be trumpeting from the rooftops.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, I just feel like people watching this, as you say, if you are relying on public services in any way, you're going to be thinking, well, nothing in Britain is working, and I am poorer than I was at the last election. And it doesn't feel like he's really addressing those things. It feels like this is a slightly kind of setting his own, you know, marking his own homework or setting himself up to do so.
It's quite a strange thing to do, is it not, to release a video like this? I mean, it reminds me of those times during COVID when Boris would sit at that desk and sort of reassure the nation, or worse still, tell the nation we're going into another lockdown. Why has he decided to do this? Do you think this is an unofficial start to electioneering?
I think people who work in broadcast will recognise that this is an unusual thing to do. And that will raise those suspicions. It could just be that he's kind of trying to set the agenda for a new year and talk to the public. And as I say, he did make this speech to Parliament about his 5 promises, and perhaps this is kind of packaging that up to talk to the nation rather than simply to people who really watch politics closely. But you're right, it is an unusual thing to do.
He's been a bit like, he's often likened to a submarine. he's just disappeared from view for long periods. I mean, we do not see much of this Prime Minister. I guess that's perhaps an attempt to address it.
Perhaps it's a change of tack. I mean, people, I think, who know him well say that, you know, for the first 3 months he was really kind of tinkering under the hood and really getting to know policy. They say he has that kind of like management consultant type approach. And perhaps now he's, you know, figured out exactly what his priorities are and he's selling them to the nation. But as you say, it's an odd way to go about things.
I don't want a management consultant running the country. I want somebody with enthusiasm, bravura. I mean, you heard Boris the night before speaking at the Carlton Club, the very establishment of the Conservative Party, where that portrait was unveiled of him. He was terrific. Like him or loathe him, he had real energy and he quickly identified the issues that have to be dealt with, illegal migration, all the rest. And it was a typical bravura Boris performance. And I thought, I wonder how many Tory MPs are thinking, we do the right thing getting rid of him?
I think Tory MPs might be lying to themselves if they don't remember the state of the party during Partygate. I mean, the polls, Boris's personal polling ratings were dire and he was contaminating the Conservative brand. So his supporters say that the Conservatives were actually polling better, but the fact is that the party itself was being dragged down by this unpopular Prime Minister. We're now in the opposite situation where the party is polling badly, but Rishi Sunak's personal ratings are much better. And I think the fact is, yes, it's understandable to miss that charisma, that enthusiasm, that Boris factor, but he just was not up to the job of being Prime Minister.
I also want to ask you about Andrew Bridgen. Matt Hancock, interestingly, somebody who has had the whip withdrawn himself in recent months because of appearing on reality TV, stood up in PMQs yesterday, highlighting some of the language that he'd used in relation to vaccines and the Holocaust, and consequently Andrew Bridgen having the whip withdrawn himself.
I think there are three things going on here with Andrew Bridgen. There was this tweet comparing the vaccine rollout to the Holocaust. I mean, horrendous language, but also criticising one of the government's greatest achievements, which is the vaccine rollout. The second thing is that he had previously been suspended for multiple breaches of the ministerial code over lobbying. And if you read the report into this, I mean, he was kind of accusing the investigator of being corrupt and seeking a peerage. You know, he was behaving bizarrely and lobbying on behalf of this company. And the third thing, of course, is that Labour has this huge problem with anti-Semitism, which Keir Starmer has been, you know, completely ruthless about, and the Conservative Party just cannot be tainted by the same thing.
Yeah, the Chief Whip, Simon Hart, saying Bridgen crossed a line. The vaccine is the best defence we have. Misinformation costs lives. And, of course, Holocaust Memorial Day just coming up in a couple of weeks. So really important, as I say, to draw that line there. What about the emphasis on Rishi Sunak's personal health matters, whether or not he uses private healthcare or not? Does this matter, or is this another sort of fixation, I suppose? You know, are you pro-Harry, are you pro-William, are you Brexit, are you not? Are you private school, are you not? Are you private healthcare or not? Do we really need more divisiveness in our public debate?
I think Rishi's biggest mistake here was just not being honest and upfront on the question. You'll know, Andrew, that Margaret Thatcher had a great answer to this question. She said, I exercise my right as a free citizen to choose private healthcare, to see a doctor of my choosing at time of my choosing. If he'd just been upfront about it in the first place, he wouldn't have dragged it over several news cycles and turned it into this identity issue. And frankly, I think it's extremely naive. He knows that his wealth makes him a target for this kind of accusation. He's been through it before with his wife's non-dom status. I don't understand why he didn't recognise that this might come up and sort it out.
Did anyone really think the British Prime Minister gets on the phone at 8:01 in the morning to try and book an appointment at his local NHS GP surgery and then gets told at 8:02, you're number 49 in the queue? Of course not.
No, absolutely. And if that was the case, that's a waste of the state's resources.
Exactly.
He should be focusing on work. And also, it's not unusual. There's been a huge surge in people using private GPs. I think it's something like 20% in the past year, because people know they can't get an appointment with a GP. It's not unusual, and I don't think people would have a problem with it if he had not been...
Yeah.
You know,
if you're asked a straight
about
question, you should give a straight answer.
But is that a symptom of the kind of media landscape that these politicians operate in, that they can't... They always have to think, what's the headline going to be? Can I be honest? Which is such a shame, because honesty, I genuinely believe in politics, is what the general public wants.
You could see when he was asked that question in that interview at the weekend, he paused. And I thought, oh, he's going to smile and he's going to answer it. But he was thinking, how do I get out of this? And 3 times he dodged it and kept banging on about the fact his father was an NHS GP. Fabulous. We're not talking about that. He should have just said, yeah, and I'm proud, and what of it?
And I think this is perhaps a sign that, you know, he has not been in Parliament that long. He was only elected in 2015 and, you know, he's had such a meteoric rise that I do think that there's a slight aspect of naivety.
Yeah.
OK. Alice Denby, always good to get your thoughts. Thank you very much indeed. Now, more travel misery today. We were touching on the strikes, weren't we? In London, the Elizabeth line, which opened only a couple of months ago, is seeing walkouts in a dispute over pay.
And it comes as Number 10 is signalling it's now optimistic about a deal with rail unions to end the strike action, which has paralysed large parts of the country.
Well, joining us now is GBNews national reporter Theo Jacumba, who's at Paddington Station for us. Good morning to you. Goodness me, these news of more strikes being announced yesterday by the civil service, the rail in disarray. Give us an overview, but also the latest on where you are.
Good morning. Yes, it's windy. I was going to say bright and early morning, but it's raining here. But to many surprise for the passengers who are coming here, they're finding that there are gates here at Paddington. So what's happening today is that the Elizabeth line industrial action is taking place. So this is TSSA members and Prospect Union members who represent members who work on the infrastructure on the Elizabeth line. So between Paddington and Abbeywood today, there are no services, but there are services on the Elizabeth line towards the west, towards Maidenhead, Reading and Heathrow, but around 2 trains per hour will be running throughout the day, and the service will be resuming as normal tomorrow around 9 a.m. So this has been ongoing for a while. The TfL, Transport for London, hopes they'd find a resolution before today, but unfortunately that hasn't happened. So it's meant staff are off today and they aren't working as they normally would do. So we do find ourselves in this situation again for those who want to be travelling around London and out of London as well. This is affecting particularly those who want to go into the financial district towards Canary Wharf as well today. So of course it's more disruption for travellers. In terms of overall, this week we've heard from the unions, particularly Mick Lynch, who's been critical of the government's approach, not giving their union members a deal which they say is acceptable, particularly during this time of increased cost of living. And there is some speculation that there could be a breakthrough though, with the government potentially giving them a new deal. So it's an opportunity for unions to sit down again and have a conversation with workers and just to make sure that this deal is the right one for them. But in terms of Elizabeth line workers, they were offered 4% last year, and this year in 2023, 4.4%. But again, if those conversations, particularly in the national picture, are approved, then that will be a good picture for passengers who want to travel. But again, we'll have to see whether they accept that or not. We don't know at the moment, but we'll be watching and keeping a close eye on that.
OK, Theo Jacumba, thank you very much indeed for that.
So I'm not very optimistic. Mick Lynch,
well, he
from
sounds
the
like he's up
RMT,
for a fight.
Yeah, he was before MPs in Parliament yesterday saying, no way, no way. And he's also implacably opposed to the infrastructure of driver-only trains. They've been operating in Britain for 30 years, in 30% of the country.
But you sense that he has clocked on that people feel a bit strange about the concept, even though, as you say, they've been around, and certainly in Europe as well, lots of evidence that there's no problem with it. Let us know, what do you feel about the idea of a driver-only operated train? Is it a sticking point for you? I suspect if they separated the two issues, which was what was happening in the past, we could have had a deal, and then they could address that separately. But it was, as we understand it, Number 10 that introduced focus on that at the last minute. Anyway,
the idea a driver can operate the brakes, but Mick Lynch doesn't think can operate the doors of a train. Mad.
Yeah. It's got to have progress. But anyway, let us know your thoughts this morning. And we're going to bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. Heavy winds of up to 60 miles per hour are expected in parts of the UK today. A yellow weather warning for heavy rain in Wales and southwest England is also in place until 5 o'clock this afternoon. The Met Office is warning of possible power cuts, dangerous driving conditions and delays to public transport. And I have to say, it was really squally this morning coming in, and we could hear on Theo's microphone just then a lot of wind about. So I think it's going to be quite an interesting weather day.
Heavy wind, you think, well, that's good for the wind turbine.
Yes.
It's alternative energy, but now we're here, it's going to cause power cuts.
You're so right.
You just can't win. Now, Leo Varadkar and Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, will meet political parties at Stormont later as talks are finally progressing over the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Irish Premier will join the Labour leader in Belfast to discuss the post-Brexit deadlock.
The annual income people need for a minimum standard of living when they retire has jumped by nearly a fifth in a year. The Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association says the lowest possible lifestyle cost for a single person has risen by 18% to almost £13,000.
A food blogger from Northamptonshire is encouraging people to save money and support British farmers by eating more seasonal veg, as long as that doesn't mean sprouts.
I love sprouts.
Oh.
What do you have against sprouts?
They're overcooked,
Oh, no,
normally.
you can do them in so many different ways, in
Right.
salads or whatever it is. Anyway, Millie Fife says that filling your plate with locally grown winter vegetables like Brussels sprouts, can you believe it, and kale can help during the cost of living crisis.
Well, last month, food inflation rose to more than 13%. It really is a big problem. It's the highest rate on record. And our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, he has more.
In Yelvertoft, the final few sprouts in Millie's garden are making their way onto the menu tonight. At a time when costs are increasing, the food blogging mum says eating seasonal veg grown locally instead of imported stuff can save you cash, and growing your own is even cheaper.
So at the moment we're in winter and brassicas are in season at the moment, so your Brussels sprouts and your kale, full of iron and vitamins, they're so fresh, and buying in season means that it's low food miles, but it also is cheaper on the purse as well.
Last month, food inflation rose to 13.3%, according to the British Retail Consortium, the highest rate on record.
Come on, girls. Come on.
As a farming family, Millie and her husband Andrew know firsthand how the cost of food is challenging consumers.
In this particular building, we've got some of this year's spring-born calves, which have recently been weaned. So they're just getting used to being inside now. They've come in because it's so wet outside now.
Andrew's been a farmer for 12 years.
The cost of production to produce these animals has more or less doubled to us in the last 18 months or so. The cost to the consumer, unfortunately, will have to go up, because if it doesn't go up, we will evidently stop doing it, so therefore food has to go up.
The UK food and farming industry pumps £120 billion into the economy. The National Farmers Union says that farmers produce healthy, affordable, quality food to world-leading standards, all while protecting and enhancing our precious countryside. And that buying British produce not only means you're supporting our farmers, but also that you're cutting down on food miles. Millie started blogging about the meals she makes to try and connect others with food grown by British farmers. Now she's released a new e-cookery book endorsed by Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal. It's filled with simple meals for busy parents.
For me, sausages are a real hero ingredient, and it's one of the things that I always have in my fridge or in my freezer. A packet of sausages can be as low as sort of £1.50, £2. For me, it's really important to be able to cook a meal from scratch and feed my family well using fresh seasonal produce, which I know that will make them happy and healthy. And all of these meals, they're quick, they're very easy, they're no fuss.
While increasing costs are unavoidable, the effect of rising prices doesn't have to mean a drop in the standard of your meals. Will Hollis for GB News in Yelvertoft.
Oh, doesn't that look like a lovely kitchen?
Yeah.
Oh, it just looks so cosy and British. I love it. After the break, we'll be talking about the worrying rise in DIY health hacks on TikTok. You would not believe some of the advice people have been given on TikTok.
I've never looked at TikTok.
I'm not a
It's gonna
TikToker
be-
myself.
It's going to be an enlightenment
It is,
for me.
but in the worst way. But first of all, really important to get your forecast today because there's some wild weather out there.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGibbon from the Met Office. It's a frosty start for northern Scotland this morning, but elsewhere, further wet and windy weather, and it's wettest in the south once again. Wales, southwest England, seeing more persistent and heavy rainfall because of these weather fronts, which are bringing a large amount of wet weather into the south and the west as we start off Thursday. That low will bring some strengthening winds as well to the northwest later, but it's the rain that is the most concern for South Wales and southwest England as we start the day. Risk of further flooding because of the wet weather that we've seen recently. The most persistent rain does move through. It's replaced by showers by the afternoon, but also some brighter interludes. The strongest of the winds also begin to ease, but it stays blustery. As rain bumps into the cold air, meanwhile, across central Scotland, we can expect some snow above 400 or 500 metres. Feeling cold in the north, 5 or 6 Celsius at lower levels. It looks like it will be 12 or 13 in the south, so staying mild for England and Wales. Now, Further showers drive through on Thursday evening, strengthening winds for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland and Irish Sea coast with gales in places. And it's a blustery end to the night, but with the wind coming from the northwest, it's going to be a fresher start, I think, for southern areas, even if it is frost-free. A brighter start, though, as well for the south and the east. Some sunshine at times on Friday morning, more especially into the afternoon. The skies brighten up more widely, but there'll be further showers affecting Northern Ireland, northern and western Scotland, parts of northern and central England, 1 or 2 for the southwest as well. In between the showers, we can expect it to stay breezy, and so that's going to have an effect on how it feels. It's going to feel quite chilly, I think, but temperatures slightly above average in the south, closer to normal further north. Further rain to come on Saturday, some heavy rain across North Wales and northwest England in particular. That clears to showers on Sunday, but also turns colder, with some of those showers turning to sleet and snow in Scotland.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Well, still to come on today's programme.
6:45, we're talking about property prices, more people being subjected to inheritance tax. We'll tell you how not to get caught out.
And at 7:45, with so many of us trying dry January this year, not me, we'll find out about an alternative to alcohol that claims to mimic the effect, but without the hangover.
I am desperate to try this out. Yes, me too. Fortunately, we don't have any samples to try this morning. Let us know your thoughts on all of the topics we're covering this morning. Get in touch the usual ways. Email us gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us @gbnews. Now, with the boom of TikTok, it's no surprise that amongst all the funny videos, there is a growing library of health and well-being advice.
According to a recent study by Charity RX, more than a quarter of UK adults have admitted to trying a wellness or fitness trend after seeing it on social media.
So with the potential for some of these helpful health hacks to be unsafe, how can we separate the truth from the lies? Well, we're joined now by Clinical Director of Evergreen Life, Dr. Brian Fisher, to advise us. Good morning to you. Now, Andrew and I are both feeling a bit like dinosaurs because neither of us are on TikTok, but I suppose this is like the young person's version of Googling symptoms, which we've all heard about and what a headache that causes for doctors. But if youngsters are seeing all of these tips, unsurprisingly then, there's going to be some misinformation in there and it's clearly not being policed. I mean, one of the tips that I've seen is online is removing moles with vinegar.
Yes, good morning. Hello.
Can Good morning.
I'm Brian Fisher. I'm a GP and I'm clinical director of an app called Evergreen Life. And yes, these hacks are potentially very dangerous. The one that you described about removing moles, I'm particularly concerned about, because moles can be caused by all sorts of things, and just messing about with them. And there's a really shocking TikTok video about the mole being removed. Could be extremely dangerous if you're dealing with a cancer, which is not unusual in younger people. It could be very dangerous indeed. So we're very concerned about it at Evergreen Life. We're an app and a website that helps people take more control over their health and healthcare and make informed decisions to increase their happy and healthy years. And we offer access to GP records and a whole range of other things to help people stay as fit and well as possible. Google, you mentioned, I think it's we're keen for people to learn as much as possible about their health, and I think it helps GPs and it helps doctors if people are well informed. Google is reasonably well documented. We can get a reasonable idea of how solid the information and the advice is on Google, but TikTok really is much more difficult to ensure the veracity of the information. So we think this is extremely worrying on TikTok. So some of the suggestions are just a bit laughable, like putting onions in your socks to help your cold. Just a bit, crazy, but probably not dangerous. I think probably overnight rather than when you're walking.
Oh, but, right.
Some of the other hacks are really concerning.
The general advice, Doctor, because
so they suggest.
Go on.
Sorry, go on.
No, I say I have a terrible confession. If I feel twinges, I go onto Google.
Yes,
and have
me
a look,
too. Yes,
because I don't want to trouble my doctor. But I wonder if a lot of people are looking at Google and TikTok simply because they can't get to see a GP.
Well, I don't know if access to Google has increased over the last few months, but if you want to discuss that as well, it is a very difficult state of affairs, which I think, and this is probably not Evergreen's view necessarily, but it is mine, that the difficulty in accessing GPs is entirely the responsibility of the government. It's a very difficult situation at the moment. GPs are working harder than ever and seeing more and more people, despite there being fewer and fewer GPs. So it's a very difficult situation. But the TikTok aspect is really worrying. I don't have a simple solution to it. Obviously, in my opinion, TikTok should take responsibility for this kind of misinformation, which is potentially really dangerous.
Yeah, and look, social media were really good, weren't they, throughout the COVID crisis, and continue to be, by putting a notification on saying if you want, accurate scientific information about vaccines, this is the link, and anything relating to vaccines had that flag come up. But as you say, TikTok sounds like a bit of a Wild West. But I'm just asking you, on the issue of moles, and I ask you this because my husband's considered high risk, he's very moly, and he's under the care of a hospital for his moles rather than his GP. And he received a note about his appointment that he gets every 6 months in December to say, I'm terribly sorry, we can't see you in December because there's problems with waiting lists, and deferring it another 6 months. And then that was deferred another 6 months. So it will be a year since he's been seen. So whilst we've got these sorts of delays in the NHS, I don't want to get into the politics too much, but you can see why people are turning to alternative solutions. I mean, what's he supposed to do in that situation?
Yes, I completely understand, and it is a real worry. So, the government is clearly not managing the NHS properly, and certainly there are so many aspects of our daily life at the moment that seems to be falling apart. Of course, people are going to try and do whatever they possibly can to stay as fit and well, but we can't possibly endorse these kind of crazy ideas. Teeth whitening, using hydrogen peroxide, eating raw meat, which obviously is potentially very dangerous if you don't clean it properly. Sun cream contouring, apparently, or sunning your bum directly into the sunlight without any sun cream. It's all crazy stuff and very concerning indeed.
Yeah, I mean, the mind boggles on that one, I have to say. I was reading about that last night. No idea. Apparently, it's trying to maximise your vitamin D exposure. But it's all nonsense, as you say. Dr. Brian Fisher, fascinating to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed.
Now, after the break, we're going to be going through the papers with Freddie Gray and Stefan Taki.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deems & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Well, welcome back. It's time to go through the papers now, which me and Isabel love. Joining us this morning, show business reporter Stephanie Tecci and the deputy editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray.
Well, you say it is. I'm not sure it is.
Well, the first question to Freddie Gray, have you been in prison? What have you done to your hair?
I had an incident with my head on Tuesday. It was my birthday, and I thought
Happy
I'd go get my
birthday.
birthday haircut, which I do sometimes.
Right.
And I wasn't really concentrating, and he got very aggressive with the... My son said I looked like Phil Foden in a fat suit.
Oh, wow.
Did you have what they call a number 5 or something?
I think it's number 1 on the sides.
Oh, my goodness.
It'll grow back, that's all I can say.
Thank goodness. Yeah, that's the best thing about haircuts. It's never forever. Anyway, welcome.
Thanks for that intro, though.
Happy New Year, Freddie.
Happy New Year.
Shall we talk about energy costs, Freddie? On the front of The Guardian, fury as millions on prepay energy being plunged into the cold and dark. It's all about these meters.
It is the prepay meters, which the Citizens Advice Bureau are very exercised about. And it is quite a dramatic story. I mean, up to 2 million people are being disconnected at least once a month. Estimates that 3.2 million people could soon face the inability to have power because of these prepay meters, which can be installed forcibly, which is quite shocking to a lot of people. I mean, I do think the bigger part of the story still goes back to the energy crisis. It's not actually the system by which people pay for their energy. But it's a significant story, and a lot of people are at breaking point.
It goes to the argument about why did the government not means test support for energy? Why are people who are
and huge
millionaires and multi-millionaires, big houses, getting the £65 a month back on their energy bill when people are now being cut off, which they certainly should not be?
Well, and also people with disabilities who are not meant to be cut off are being cut off. So that's another problem. And it just makes you think, thank God we've had a reasonably mild winter so far. Otherwise, this winter could have been really catastrophic.
Isn't the means testing argument that it's just A, really fiddly and B, really costly to taxpayers? I mean, I don't know if that's true, but that's what we're kind of led to believe, certainly.
They say that, but it would avoid this sort of problem.
Yeah.
And does Tony Blair and the King need £65 a month off their energy bills.
Well, and
July.
forcibly installing prepay meters is quite fiddly too.
Yes.
Sometimes you've got to wait for people to be out the house.
I know, and they install those for the benefit not of the customers, but for the energy companies.
For the energy companies,
because they don't want to employ meter readers.
Well, does this affect you at home? If you're watching this and you are outraged about it, we would love to hear from you on this story. A really important issue on the front of The Guardian this morning. Stephanie, let's talk about another issue. As somebody who has been through awful childbirths in the NHS, I'm fascinated to hear this. 4 in 10 women struggling to get help whilst giving birth.
So, in a new report by the Care Quality Commission, there says that there's a concerning decline in new mothers who are able to get help from staff while they're giving birth. They're saying there's also a concern of the amount of time women can spend with their partners after they've given birth. It's quite limited. And also, it doesn't stop there. When they get home, most of them don't have no more medical access to get advice on things such as how could they do their feeding correctly. And to be honest, it's quite disappointing to hear this, but I think it's just a bigger trend of the NHS which is failing. But more than anything, as an expecting mother or new mother, you would think the most safest place to be will be on a maternity ward, and this report is just suggesting that is not the case. And the reason why this report has come to the press is because, you know, over the years there's been hundreds of cases of women and newborns who have died unnecessarily, who could have survived if they had that medical intervention or expertise. So I don't know how your experiences have been.
I mean, my experience wasn't particularly recent. My youngest is about to turn 5, but equally, I think it is for most people, certainly in their late 20s or 30s, whenever they're having children now, it is their only real experience of a hospital stay. Certainly, that was my. You know, I'd never really spent time in hospital before, and I have to say I was shocked at the level of care. And I mean, the horror stories across the board. But there will be people watching this who'll be genuinely worried about it. And time and again on this programme, we have heard from midwives and from women, as you say, in relation to these horror stories. But to have the Care Quality Commission now corroborating what they've been saying, at what point is something going to be done about it?
I know, and I think it's the Mail's reporting today, Stephanie. At the same time, the NHS under fire for spending hundreds of thousands of pounds here we go again on woke training, so midwives can know how to deal with pregnant transgender activists. Chest feeding, no breastfeeding, not mothers, expectant people. This is madness at a time when basic care is being deprived to a pregnant woman. I
almost don't want to blame the medical staff because I think the NHS, every single department is overstretched. But it seems the people at the top, they're putting their priorities in the wrong places, such as £100,000 on chest feeding when you've got mothers who are dying and their newborns are dying because there's a lack of care and attention.
You've got kids, Freddie, haven't you?
I do. Well, we were lucky, I suppose. All of our experiences were very good with the NHS. Were very good. We had emergency caesareans for 2 of them, which were brilliantly done. You know, incredible care. Maybe it's the hospital. Chelsea and Westminster was very good.
That's when mine were born. I'm not saying, by the way, the care was poor, as in the people who were working were trying incredibly hard. It was just the access to midwives or whatever.
Well, it's just another area in which the NHS is failing. And, I mean, it's the scale of the problems with the NHS is so enormous that every single bit of this enormous monolith you look at is kind of creaking or collapsing.
No. None of it being helped by the strikes, of course.
None of it being helped by the strikes, exactly.
It's going to make it worse.
Yeah. No, it's all gloomy as far as the NHS is concerned, and I feel we're going to be talking about it a hell of a lot.
And yet the true cost is people's lives and their health, and it's...
I agree.
Little babies as well, you know, it's supposed to be such a happy, joyous moment, isn't it? Cash payments are on the rise for the first time in a decade, Freddie. This surprises me.
Yes, well, as someone who fears the cashless society, and I don't like the idea of banks knowing exactly what you're spending on.
There you go.
Never go out without.
Always carry some cash.
Always.
I can't remember the last time I had any in my hand. I genuinely don't think I have.
I'm
not. I've never. No. I use my card. Why would I need cash?
I tried to use cash, but quite often I go through phases of not having it. But the reason it's going up, according to this report in the Times, is that it's a very good way of saving, and people are using it more.
Yes.
But you get your money out at the beginning of the week, and then you can, control your spending more closely. And I think it's a good thing I've done that before. I think it's a good thing to.
The banks will despair because not only are they closing banks,
Yeah.
Even though they're making billions, they're closing down a lot of cash machines.
Cash is harder to get.
More
you
and more
noticed?
difficult to get.
It is. Looking for a cash point these days is so hard, but I would like to use more cash because I think I get a bit tappy-friendly with my card. You just tap away, and then it's not until you get your statements you realise how much money you've spent. And I think when you physically have cash, you're much more aware psychologically of what you're spending.
And with kids as well. I don't think my children understand the value of money because everything's just... They don't see it. And that worries me. You know, they have a piggy bank, but they don't have anything in it because there's no...
There are disadvantages to paying cash because I was in a black cab the other day and I paid cash and the driver was rather large and he turned around and said, I could kiss you.
No thanks.
Maybe I pay a bit more cash, you would. Or maybe
You're so naughty.
Well, and people do appreciate being given a cash tip, I think, over a card. I gave my hairdresser a cash tip, which you're going to say I probably shouldn't have done.
Yeah, I know. You're wrong.
Always give my hairdresser a cash tip. And in restaurants, I say to the waiter, waitress, is this, this 12.5%, which is outrageous, is automatically deducted. How much of it do you see? So I then take it off the bill and pay it to them.
Good.
Cash. Always use cash.
Cash is king.
Also, a possible sign of inflation coming down, the increase in the use of cash.
Oh, right.
Apparently, yeah.
OK.
How does that work?
Well, I think it means that people are being more measured with their money, which means that the value of money is increasing, which is a sign that inflation is happening.
Makes me think of wheelbarrows of cash and inflation. I always think of it as a bad thing.
Not in Weimar, no.
OK, good.
Right.
Stephanie, let's look at the front of the Telegraph. This scares me. 750,000 households could soon default on their mortgages. This is what we were all being warned about at the end of last year.
It feels like it's becoming more, real and more a threat to people who own their homes, because at the moment they're saying 750,000 households are at risk of defaulting their mortgages, and it's such an accumulation of many things. It's the cost of living crisis. We're currently in a recession, and they're saying this is going to last till the end of the year. And also, who's going to be affected most by it is young buyers, because they've already overstretched themselves, like myself, to try get on the mortgage ladder. And then once you're on there and you're seeing all the bills that are associated with it, it's such a worst time in the market to try being the property. At the moment, people are predicted to be spending £3,000 more each year on their mortgages. And I know to some people that's not a lot, but to most households it's a lot. It's a stretch.
A lot of the problem, Freddie, isn't it, that people have been in a fixed term, maybe for a year or 2 years, when interest rates were virtually non-existent. They've now gone up again and again. And now they're going to have to face the grim reality of the higher interest rates, which could go up again.
Well, they're coming up. I mean, the good news, I think, is that the market currently expects it to peak at about 4.55%, which is historically still quite low for interest rates. But as Stephanie says, the problem is that, so many young people, particularly, have stretched themselves ridiculously to get on the property market. And understandably, they've done that, but they are massively overstretched. And this could be an indicator that house prices are about to collapse. A lot of panic sales.
There's such a demand, I think, that there will always be a shortage of houses. If 750,000 people default on their mortgages, what then happens to them? I mean, we're talking about those people coming out of having to sell their homes.
Well, that's why it could mean, decline in property repossessions and basically fire sales on some properties. But, I think the government, again, may have to get involved with more support, another crisis, that they're going to have to massive spending, if so. But, I mean, so far, as I say, the good news is 4.5%, 5% is historically should be manageable.
Yeah, I can remember, because I'm that old, in the 90s when they soared up to 14, 15, 16%, and I remember thinking, I might as well just give this back now. I just can't do it. I took lodgers, everything. That's how I got through it.
But didn't the wages match what you were paying? Like, was you able to support yourself more?
Sadly, they didn't then. But it was a real worry, because we'd all been encouraged to buy our homes. And, but I would say to people who are worried, if you have got a spare room, rather than repossess, get a lodger.
Yep. Fill up the rooms if you can. Should we talk about COVID? Andrew Bridgen got himself in a lot of trouble. Interesting to see the chorus of condemnation for anti-vax rhetoric yesterday in the Commons, saying it was unscientific, and getting suspended from the Conservative Party for it.
Yes, Andrew Bridgen, not the most intelligent thing he's ever said, but, I mean, I think the public wants to have the conversation about vaccines. Whether they were effective or not.
I think they do, but I don't think you can compare reasonably the rollout of the vaccine to the Holocaust, which was
No, you're quite right.
Evil act in the last 100 years, an attempt to wipe out an entire race.
No, of course.
6 million Jews murdered.
Of course, it was a very stupid thing to say, and he's being punished.
Yeah, and he's obscured any legitimate argument he may have had about the vaccine.
Exactly. But, I mean, I do think, the government takes such massive pride in the vaccine rollout, and, of course, it was very efficiently done by standards of other nations.
Great triumph for Boris.
Great triumph for Boris. But, what's the legacy of the vaccine? We'll see.
Well, you say that, and, the sample size now is however many million around the world having had multiple doses of it. And, yes, there will be risks associated with the vaccine, but it's considered to be the best defence there is against COVID. And misinformation, as the Chief Whip yesterday said, costs lives.
Cost life? Well, I mean, the vaccine has undoubtedly saved lives, particularly among the old and the vulnerable. But, do you remember when the sort of newspapers were kind of... every front page was about how there's no risk to the vaccine. It was a sort of united effort to get the nation to get vaccinated, which worked. But did we have a realistic conversation about how effective it is? Were we told that it would stop transmission? Yes, we were.
It was like a wartime spirit, wasn't it? The newspapers reported during the Dunkirk evacuation everything was going very well.
Yeah.
It absolutely was not. It was, I think, a deliberate attempt by the government talking to editors and broadcasters. You've got to get behind this vaccine because we think it's the only way we can keep this turning into a real bigger crisis than it was.
I totally see. I saw the need for it then, and I understand that. But I mean, I think now we're past it where we can have a conversation. But as you say, let's not do it in the Andrew Bridgen style of making absurd comparisons.
And it's a gift for Downing Street, who despise him.
Yes.
Andrew Bridgen was one of the first MPs to put in a letter against Theresa May, against Boris Johnson, against Liz Truss. So he's got very few friends in Number 10, so they'll be glad to see the back of him.
He also has an unfortunate face. Which I think a lot of people object to.
I can't comment on that.
I've got an unfortunate face too.
Freddie, you do not have an unfortunate face.
You do have an unfortunate haircut. So labour the point.
Stephanie, let's end, shall we, on disability benefits in the Times.
Yes.
Go to work and keep disability payments. This is controversial.
It is.
We're so wedded to our... benefits.
It seems like the disability benefits system is in need of a shake-up, and what the government is trying to suggest at the moment is you can keep claiming sickness benefits after you return to work, and they'll be offered tax breaks as well for getting a job. At the moment, Rishi's big thing is to deal with the economy, and at the moment we have 9 million economic inactive people not working due to sickness, and at the moment that's costing the taxpayer £3.7 billion, and that's set to rise up to £8.2 billion by 2027, which is just not on in this kind of day and age. And while people with disabilities and sickness do need support, I do think we do need to look at how they could be motivated to contribute into society in the way that they can.
It's interesting, though. This is going to upset some people, isn't it? If you think of Tory backbenchers, what? They're back to work, they can work, but they can keep these benefits?
They can keep the benefits, but I think, this is the carrot, the carrot, not the stick.
Exactly.
I think the stick will probably have to come, because obviously at some point you do have to cut off those benefits. But it is a massive problem. We disguise our employment figures with long-term sickness. We've had a huge expansion in the number of long-term sick. It's a major, major cost for the government. And this is probably the most benevolent way of trying to get people.
Are they long-term sick, or are some of them skivers?
Of course, some of them are skivers.
It's a mixture of both.
We've got more long-term sick after the pandemic than any other comparative economy in Europe. Can't understand why.
Right,
could be the very...
Some of it's long COVID.
Generous benefit.
Some of it's long COVID, which we read on the front page of the Eye is not as bad as first feared, according to the first major study.
And to be a cynic, it's because we have a generous benefit system.
And I think it's a psychological thing as well. I think once you get used to not working, you get used to kind of not scrounging off the state in that sense. And I think to get yourself back into work, you have to feel motivated. And I think this is why the government are trying to bring these incentives to kind of change people's mindsets.
Absolutely.
One thing the Treasury is discussing is over 50s coming back to work could have 6 months without income tax. Which is quite an attractive idea.
Genius. Maybe it's time to quit before.
Quit when you're 50.
Have a think about it.
Come back when you're 51.
All right. Stephanie Tetchy, Freddie, great. Thank you for taking us through the papers for the first time. We'll see you again just after 7:30.
Now let's bring you up to date. Heavy winds of up to 60 miles an hour expected in parts of the UK today. So it's a yellow weather warning for heavy rain in Wales. South West England is also in place until 5 o'clock this afternoon. The Met Office is warning of possible power cuts, dangerous driving conditions and delay to public transport.
Thank you.
Leo Varadkar and Sir Keir Starmer will meet political parties at Stormont later as talks progress over the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Irish Premier will join the Labour leader in Belfast to discuss the post-Brexit deadlock.
More than 3 million people in the UK ran out of credit on their prepayment meters last year, according to the consumer watchdog Citizens Advice. That's a terrible figure. It says more households were unable to top up their energy accounts last year than in the whole of the past decade combined.
Now, it's safe to say not many of us really enjoy paying our taxes, do we? But a new poll shows that our least favourite tax of all is the dreaded inheritance tax.
Here to tell us exactly what you and your loved ones need to do to avoid being caught out by it, we're joined by the host of This Is Money podcast, Georgie Frost.
Good morning to you,
Hello.
Georgie. Like, it's sad, isn't it, inheritance tax? Very often people are going through the grief of a loved one and then the realisation that a huge amount of what that person has accrued throughout their lifetime is then owed to HMRC. And we're talking not just their properties, and I think it's anything over the value of, is it £325,000?
Nothing in terms of properties these days.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what the average price of a home is, but, you know, it's around there. But also stuff like granny's rings. All up for grabs.
Yeah, up for grabs. Indeed, it is. It's interesting that a poll shows that this is the most hated tax. When you think actually how many estates pay it, it's under 5%. But you're right, there's a sense of unfairness. I've worked really hard all my life. Why should I have to give? And you're right, above £325,000, it's 40%. That is a huge whack. There is an additional allowance if you leave your home to direct descendants, so you can get 175,000 extra. So you're looking at £500,000, but still, as you rightly point out, in some areas of the country, that won't even cover your home. And what's happening at the moment is HMRC are catching more and more people out. And one of the things that is catching them out are other assets. So what do we mean by assets when you leave it over this figure of 325,000? Well, of course, it's property. It's anything like investments, money, but also possessions. And that can include granny's ring, absolutely, an expensive painting, a vintage car, anything that's worth some money. And more people are being caught out by this. And I think one of the reasons is HMRC invested very heavily in a affectionately termed snooper computer about a decade ago. So they're much better at catching people out, but also more people are being caught within the net of inheritance tax because it's been frozen for so long, the threshold. It will continue to be frozen, more and more people being dragged in and just don't understand the complex rules.
I'm just looking, Georgie, the average house price in the UK now is a little under 300,000. If the house price inflation continues, that means soon virtually everybody with an average house will be caught by inheritance tax. And I can remember being in the Tory conference way back in 2007 when George Osborne, the Shadow Chancellor, said, this is a promise, we will raise the inheritance tax threshold to £1 million. Another broken promise.
Well, I should point out, look, firstly, if you pass it over to a spouse or a civil partner, then generally there's no inheritance tax to pay. And also you double it up. So if you are a married couple, then you'll have 2 times that £500,000. So technically they could say, yes, it is £1 million that you could pass on. But look, I would suggest to anyone, if you're in this situation, I mean, firstly, just, you know, as you pointed out quite rightly, it's a very traumatic time for families. The last thing they want to do is have a letter from HMRC saying they're investigating, because this can take years. HMRC can take as long as they want to look into these figures to make sure you're paying the right amount. So if you are in this position, just make sure your finances are in the best possible condition. And do things like mitigating how much you're going to have to pay. Now, no one knows how long they're going to live for, of course, but you have that 7-year rule. If you hand over gifts before 7 years, then you don't have to pay inheritance tax. Remember to keep very good records, detailed records, because you don't want that to fall on your family. And you know what? The other thing is, spend your money. Enjoy your life. You don't have to worry about it afterwards.
It's the old adage, give away a lot and give away early. But of course, as you say, nobody knows how long they're going to live for. And a lot of people now having to pay for their social care, for their care in their dotage. It's a really difficult thing to do and not exactly easy to hand over your house to your children.
No.
Don't you then get clobbered for capital gains if your child, for example, already owns a property?
Yes, very well pointed out. This is a complex matter. Please don't just judge whatever you do on what you hear on here, although we do hope to give good advice. Speak to a financial advisor, speak to your accountant, find out ways in which you can do this properly, and really consider what you're doing in terms of exactly right, handing over your property. There are rules around that as well if you continue to live there, etc. So get good advice on this.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
good advice.
Always.
Just curious though, Georgie, how would they know about Grandma's ring?
Oh, so this is what I was saying about the snooper computer that they invested quite heavily in 2010. Now, it's called Connect. We don't actually know all of the information that it gathers in. It's a bit like your credit rating. But we do know it looks at things like your bank account, insurance policies. That's one of the big ones that catches people out, because if it's expensive, you tend to have insurance on it. But it can look at anything like your social media accounts. It wants to know, does your lifestyle match up with what you're telling HMRC? So it looks at this information, and then it will investigate. And look, HMRC can get it wrong. You know, their calculations may be wrong, the information they have, you may have spent all your money, but that's what they use to find out.
Good excuse to have that conversation with Granny and say, Granny, do you want me to look after your ring for a while?
Yeah.
You know, give it a try, see if it fits. You never know, Granny might be on board with it.
She might forget.
She might forget.
She lent it to
You are wicked. Georgie Frost, lovely to see you. Thank you very much for all of your advice this morning.
Now we're going to have more on Rishi's pledge to fix migration, inflation and the NHS after the break.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGibbon from the Met Office. It's a frosty start for northern Scotland this morning, but elsewhere, further wet and windy weather, and it's wettest in the south once again. Wales, southwest England, seeing more persistent and heavy rainfall because of these weather fronts, which are bringing a large amount of wet weather into the south and the west as we start off Thursday. That low will bring some strengthening winds as well to the northwest later, but it's the rain that is the most concern for South Wales and southwest England as we start the day. Risk of further flooding because of the wet weather that we've seen recently. The most persistent rain does move through. It's replaced by showers by the afternoon, but also some brighter interludes. The strongest of the winds also begin to ease, but it stays blustery. As rain bumps into the cold air, meanwhile, across central Scotland, we can expect some snow above 400 or 500 metres. Feeling cold in the north, 5 or 6 Celsius at lower levels. It looks like it will be 12 or 13 in the south, so staying mild for England and Wales. Now, further showers drive through on Thursday evening. Strengthening winds for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland and Irish Sea coast with gales in places. And it's a blustery end to the night, but with the wind coming from the northwest, it's going to be a fresher start, I think, for southern areas, even if it is frost-free. A brighter start, though, as well for the south and the east. Some sunshine at times on Friday morning, more especially into the afternoon. The skies brighten up more widely, but there'll be further showers affecting Northern Ireland, northern and western Scotland, parts of northern and central England, 1 or 2 for the southwest as well. In between the showers, we can expect it to stay breezy. And so that's going to have an effect on how it feels. It's going to feel quite chilly, I think, but temperatures slightly above average in the south, closer to normal further north. Further rain to come on Saturday, some heavy rain across North Wales and northwest England in particular. That clears to showers on Sunday, but also turns colder, with some of those showers turning to sleet and snow in Scotland.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory.
twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Rishi Sunak firing the unofficial start gun on his electoral campaign as he vows to restore pride in the United Kingdom in an address to the nation.
A very good morning. It is 7 o'clock. It's Thursday, the 12th of January. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Andrew Pearce and me, Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading the news this morning.
I know this has been a tough winter. Our country faces some of the biggest challenges any of us will have seen in our lifetimes, with our economy, in our NHS, on our borders.
Rishi Sunak pledged to tackle illegal migration and NHS waiting lists. It was his first party political broadcast as Prime Minister. He also touted his record on fighting inflation, but didn't mention the wave of strikes which are disrupting the country.
Members of Parliament are demanding that suspended backbencher Andrew Bridgen be banned from standing as an MP at the next general election after he compared the COVID vaccine to the Holocaust.
And pregnant women and new mothers are being abandoned by the NHS. That's according to a new report. It's shocking, frankly. It's from the Care Quality Commission and reveals 4 in 10 women struggle to get help from staff while giving birth.
And as food inflation continues to rise, is eating more seasonal veg the key to saving money and the planet? We'll speak to a couple flying the flag for British farming during the cost of living crisis.
Do get in touch the usual way via Twitter or email. Let us know where you're watching or listening to us from. Well, our top story this morning, the Prime Minister has set out his main aims for 2023 in a party political broadcast which appears to signal a shift onto an election footing.
Yes, Rishi Sunak reiterated his hard-headed, common-sense approach to tackling both the NHS backlog and the economy. Let's have a listen.
Under my leadership, the government's priorities are your priorities, the people's priorities. Together, we're putting your needs above politics to repair the economy, strengthen our NHS, tackle illegal migration, and restore pride in the United Kingdom, our great country.
Well, joining us now for more analysis on this and the other big political news is the Deputy Editor of Capex, Alice Denby. Good morning to you. Super slick, characteristically, Rishi, but perhaps the timing of this a little bit bizarre. I mean, it sort of reminds me of the kind of addresses that Boris made at that very desk during the crisis, sometimes announcing that we were going into lockdown. Does this indicate perhaps that he's gearing up for a battle in the May elections and looking ahead to next year's general election as well?
Yeah, as you say, it did feel a bit more like a kind of election broadcast than a kind of announcement of any kind of great big policy idea. And you mentioned the May elections coming up. You're right, it does feel like this is moving on to an election footing. The worry here is that there are serious problems that the country is facing. You know, strikes, the breakdown, it seems, of all of our public services. The last thing we need is another year or more of electioneering. We need the Prime Minister to get on with the job and fix the problems this country is facing.
And odd not to mention the strikes, when on that very day we finally got the legislation put forward in the Commons by Grant Shapps, the Business Secretary, to to impose a system of minimum service in things like railways, the NHS, during strikes. In the Conservative Party manifesto, nearly 4 years ago, they brought it around far too late. But as it was that day, Why didn't he flag it up?
Yeah, it is unusual not to have mentioned strikes, as you say, because he does have legislation coming through to deal with it, and because that is the most immediate problem facing people. I mean, anyone, who was needing an ambulance would be terrified. People were genuinely scared to be having to rely on public services at the moment, and that is a consequence of many years of failing to deal with the structural problems in the NHS. The strikes here are a symptom, not the cause, but they are what is, I think, striking most immediate fear into people's hearts.
Yeah, but clearly it is a deliberate omission on his behalf, and presumably that's because he knows that his future lies in the Red Wall. I don't know where the Red Wall stands on striking, but traditionally these are, working class people who, very much Brexit voters, all the rest of it. Where do they stand in all of this? I mean, interesting. John in Blythe Valley says, say what you like about Boris, he owns the Red Wall. Without him, the Tories are history. Richard saying, I've got a suggestion. If Rishi wants an outside chance of winning the next election, stop taxing the life out of the working man and woman. So, that's the market that he's got to try and corner, and perhaps that's why he's not mentioning the strikes?
Yeah, I think perhaps that's why he's going so hard also on illegal immigration. I think that is an issue that resonates in the Red Wall, and also one where there's clear blue water with Labour. And one that he perhaps feels that he can deliver something on by the time of the next election. Now, it is possible to bring forward this legislation. It might be difficult to get it through, but it's possible to make it illegal for anyone who comes here over the Channel to ever claim asylum. And I think perhaps that's his big pitch to those Red Wall voters.
Yeah, I say it'll be popular if it works.
If it works.
And if he delivers it, because there's been a lot of talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, again, I would say that with immigration and the asylum system, it's a broken system. It takes far too long to process these applications. It's far too difficult to deport people who come here illegally. So, again, these channel crossings are a symptom of a much deeper problem, and that's really what needs to get fixed, and he just doesn't have time before the next election.
We talked about Boris. Interesting that our viewers are already mentioning him this morning, unveiling what we agreed, whether you like him or loathe him, gorgeous painting of him being unveiled at the Carlton Club. And yet he's on the front of a number of the papers. I think he's on the Mirror, he's on the front of the Times this morning. Same old Boris, it says on the Mirror, because he was talking about, almost bragging about lack of social distancing at parties during lockdown. Is he going to make a comeback? Is he a threat to Rishi Sunak?
I don't think Tory MPs have any appetite to see a return to Boris Johnson. And
Some
I think,
certainly do, goodness me. They've just set up the Conservative Democratic Organisation with Priti Patel to try and give power to the grassroots to avoid the MPs reselecting someone like Rishi.
Yeah, so this is a contest between the members of the party and the MPs. And I think members and those MPs who support them, who think that Boris is the answer, are deluding themselves. I mean, frankly, if you looked at the polling at the time of Partygate, it was Boris's personal ratings that were in the tank, and he was contaminating the entire brand of the Conservative Party. People didn't trust him, and they didn't think he was capable of running the country, and they thought he was presiding over a kind of empire of sleaze. Now, obviously, the Conservative Party's pollings are terrible, but Rishi's personal ratings are much better. Yeah. And I think their wisest course is to stick with the Prime Minister. And another change of leader after the state of things last year, I think it's just the last thing the Conservative
Party
needs.
I think it would lead to a clamour for a general election if they were to try and change Prime Minister again.
Yes.
Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick word before we move on Andrew Bridgen getting himself in a right pickle yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, these comments comparing the vaccine rollout to the Holocaust are unhinged and offensive. And I think there's the second factor is that he'd already been suspended for multiple breaches of the ministerial code over lobbying. He was being paid to approach ministers on behalf of a company. And, frankly, this is the last thing that the party needs, is people like him again, contaminating the brand. And, as I say, the issue of anti-Semitism has been so toxic for Labour that the Conservative Party cannot afford to have the same thing infect itself. So I think absolutely the right thing to withdraw the whip. It's obviously up to them whether they let him stand at the next election, but...
I make a prediction. No chance.
I think that would be the wisest course.
He's a backbench malcontent who's been critical of every single Tory leader.
Yes.
And they'll think, good, this is a way to get rid of him.
And it's just the latest in a series of scandals. It just feels like the whole party... not that, obviously, it's a minority, but it just, it can't afford to have these kind of scandals day after day. Rishi Sunak's all about accountability and competence, and he doesn't need people like that on his backbenches.
And it really was a chorus of condemnation. Matt Hancock saying that it was disgusting anti-Semitic, anti-vax conspiracy theories that he was spouting. The Chief Whip saying that he'd crossed a line, the vaccine's the best defence we have, misinformation costs lives. And Sajid Javid saying it was morally repugnant, dangerously wrong to imply the many good people who played their part in it are in some kind of conspiracy. And of course it is arguably the Conservative Party's biggest success story, the vaccine
Yes, exactly.
rollout.
I was going to say, from a political point of view, criticising one of your party's greatest achievements in that way is, you know, how can you retain the whip when you behave that way?
OK.
Yeah, it's the end of him.
Thank you very much indeed. Appreciate it.
More travel misery today. London's Elizabeth Line. It only opened 5 minutes ago. is the latest to see walkouts in yet another dispute over pay.
Yeah, this comes as Number 10 signals it's optimistic about a deal with the rail unions to end the strike action that's paralysed the country. Well, joining us now is GB News national reporter Theo Jacumba, who's at Paddington Station. I mean, the government might say they are optimistic, but goodness me, hearing Mick Lynch yesterday before a select committee meeting, sounds like he is ready to bed in for the long haul.
Yes, that's right. We could see more walkouts potentially in weeks and months to come. There doesn't seem to be a resolution at the moment, although we have heard there is some optimism, particularly over the conversations which have been had over the last few days, saying, you know, there's a new deal for the government giving that to unions, but we don't know whether they will accept them or not when they are written down on paper as negotiations continue to go on. But here at Paddington today is the Elizabeth Line, so infrastructure workers who are represented by the Transport, the TSSA and the Prospect Union, and this is a dispute over pay, and they've been having conversations with Transport for London, TfL, over the last few weeks, but they weren't able to negotiate a suitable deal which they say would have been better for their workers. Now, the services today between Paddington and Abbeywood aren't working at all, but if you are going towards the west, places like Maidenhead, Reading and Heathrow, there are services, but they're running at very minimal levels, around 2 per hour throughout the day. Here at Paddington tomorrow, services will be resuming at around 7:30, but for the rest of the network, it's expected they're going to be running again from around 9 a.m. So, as you mentioned there, this could be going on for a while. No deal as of yet, and it's up to the unions if they do accept the deal that is offered to them by the government, and having that discussion with the rail companies and, of course, the unions over the next couple of weeks.
OK, Theo, thank you very much indeed. With the time at 11 minutes past 7, let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this morning.
Heavy winds of up to 60 miles an hour expected in parts of the country today. A yellow weather warning for heavy rain in Wales and south-east England is in place until 5 o'clock this afternoon. The Met Office is warning of possible power cuts, dangerous driving conditions and, as if it's not bad enough already, delays to public transport.
Leo Varadkar and Sir Keir Starmer will meet political parties at Stormont later as talks progress over the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Irish Premier will join the Labour leader in Belfast to discuss the post-Brexit deadlock.
And this is bleak news. 750,000 households are at risk of defaulting on their mortgages over the next 2 years. This is according to the Financial Conduct Authority. More than 200,000 households have already fallen behind on their payments, and that was at the end of last June.
Now, Christmas may be over, but the trading figures for the festive season are only just coming in.
So figures for supermarket chains Tesco and M&S have been released in the last few minutes. GB News economics and business editor Liam Halligan's here to tell us what it means for the sector. Morning, Liam. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Andrew, and good to see you both this morning. This has literally just been released. The Tesco figures actually aren't too bad at all. Tesco, of course, is Britain's biggest retailer, and Tesco's chalked up 2 successive quarters of sales growth in the UK, and that's the first time that that's happened in 5 years. I think it's partly a Tesco story. That's because Tesco has been suffering. It's been losing market share to some of the big discounters, particularly Aldi and Lidl, and Tesco are clearly fighting back, trying to compete with the discounters more, and that's obviously good news for consumers. But M&S, they've reported another big fall in sales of both clothing and homewares in the 3 months leading up to Christmas, and that's bad news for one of Britain's best-known retail names. So Tesco's had a good Christmas, but M&S has suffered slightly.
Yeah, look, interesting to hear that. And I suppose, look, I'm no expert, but just extrapolating, I guess, the difference between Tesco and M&S is expensive. You know, Tesco's is quite sort of middle of the price bracket. But for those of us who are trying to save money, you go into M&S and actually a lot of people just simply won't be able to pay those sorts of prices at the current time.
That's exactly right, Isabel. We're seeing the same in food retailing, where, as I say, Aldi and Lidl are doing... they're gaining market share. Tesco and Sainsbury's are still the major players, along with Asda, in British food retailing. But the discounters are gaining ground, as you say, because consumers are voting with their feet. And it is mostly with their feet because we still buy so much of our food over the counter, if you like, and in real life rather than online. But M&S is more of an upmarket brand. It's clear here that retail sales overall are suffering. The headline number earlier this week was that retail sales are up about 6%. And I saw many newspaper headlines saying retail sales are booming, but actually they're not, because once you include into that figure 10% inflation, the volume of retail sales overall falling. And, you know, retail is the engine room of the British economy. So this is what happens when you have inflation, when you have a cost of living squeeze. Consumers' purchasing power is diminished. And so in terms of value, they spend less. And also they look for a bargain. And that's exactly what we're seeing here in these figures this morning from two iconic retailers, Britain's biggest retailer, Tesco, and also M&S as well.
Liam, food inflation is a continuing problem, isn't it?
It is, Andrew. Regular inflation is 10.9%. That's just off a 40-year high. That's the figure for November. We'll get the December figure officially out soon. But already we're seeing from the likes of the British Retail Consortium, again, other figures that came out earlier this week, that food inflation is more like 15 to 18%. And that's why we've been saying on GB News for over a year now, throughout this cost of living squeeze, that for many ordinary folk, households that are, you know, having to work hard to make ends meet, because they disproportionately spend more of their money as a share on food, on refueling, you know, the car and the van. That's why inflation for less well-off families is much, much higher than that 10% headline number. If you say to lots of families across the UK that the cost of living now is just 10% more than this time last year, that they'll think that's a sick joke, because for them the cost of living is 20, 30% higher. And that's why inflation is such a ghastly thing. And that's why it's politics to the extent it does. It doesn't just cause the industrial strife that we're seeing as workers try and gain ground and keep their wages roughly in line with inflation. It also disproportionately hits the poorest in society. And that's why it's vital inflation comes down. And I do think there are signs of that now. When Rishi Sunak, Andrew, says that inflation's going to halve by the end of the year, I think it's a bit like saying, oh, there's going to be a bit more sun in June than in January due to my policies. I think it's almost an arithmetic inevitability that inflation now is going to start falling, not immediately, but certainly after the spring and into the summer and autumn. So this cost of living squeeze, you know, it's not nice. I don't like to have to report about difficult, nasty things, but I do think that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, that's a good note to end on. Liam Halligan, thank you very much indeed for your analysis.
And after the break, that man Paul Coyte, he's going to be here with all the big sports stories and give me my latest education.
See you in a sec.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Still to come on the programme this morning at 7:45, we're looking at the alcohol alternative that claims to mimic the effects of drink, but without the hangover. I am all ears.
Me too. And at 8:20, after Rishi Sunak was urged at Prime Minister's questions to tackle radicalisation in young men because of the influence of Andrew Tate, we're going to find out just how bad the situation in schools is.
I have to say, my jaw is on the floor with this story.
Yeah.
I actually cannot believe where we are in society, that this guy has any influence whatsoever. I feel like I'm sort of turning into Mary Whitehouse over the whole thing, because it's just so depressing. How can someone so base as Andrew Tate become something of a cult hero and have this ideology? Hates women. Anyway, we're getting into all of that a little bit later on, but I was doing some research yesterday and just shocked me beyond belief. Anyway, let us know your thoughts on all the topics we're discussing.
You can join in our discussions by emailing gbviews at gbnewsuk.
OK, Paul Coit joins us in the studio to discuss all the big sports stories of the day.
I'm the anti-Tate, aren't I?
You're the you are the antithesis of...
That's what I like
absolutely.
to be. Yes, absolutely.
There's so many big stories in sports today.
There's so many.
There are.
Yes.
But although the first one I'd like to mention, it's
Yes.
kind of a little showbiz thing,
Right.
and it's sad news that Jeff Beck, the great guitarist...
Hi-Ho Silver Lining.
Absolutely. Passed away, who, by the way, hated Hi-Ho Silver Lining. Did you know that's the only song he actually sung on and had a hit with it, and he hated the song.
Did he hate the royalties?
I think he loved the royalties.
Well
He
then,
didn't
pipe
really
down.
like the song. But the thing is, the interesting thing is, Hi Ho Silver Lining was adopted and still is by so many football clubs, whereas the fans sing it. And now I was trying to go through all the clubs that use Hi Ho Silver Lining, and then they add the name of the club in the song. Now, Wolverhampton Wanderers are the ones that have it more than anybody else. I think we've got Hi Ho Silver Lining there of Wolves singing it, so they sing Wolverhampton in the middle, which hopefully will come up at some point. I don't know whether we're going to get that. Aston Villa in there as well. Sheffield, it doesn't sound like it.
We just need you to pause, apparently, Paul, in order
Really?
for them to play it.
So I can't talk over the vocal? Is that what it
Apparently
is?
not. Here we go.
But he never pauses.
Hi ho, Wolverhampton.
Exactly. So what was that lovely?
Yeah.
So
Did he get
Wolves-
royalties for that?
I don't think so.
Star.
I don't think. Aston Villa have used it. Sheffield Wednesday use it. Queen's Park Rangers have used it. But there was a 1967 edition of Top of the Pops where Jeff Beck actually sang it, and then during the guitar break went up the Spurs in the middle. So that's apparently what happened.
Did he really? Will there be tributes to him on the terraces, do you think?
I think they'll just keep singing the song.
Right, well, that's the
Because
greatest
thing
tribute
is,
to him,
I
isn't
think
it?
it is the greatest tribute. I really do. Now, the football that went on yesterday, Carabao Cup, which is the old League Cup,
Oh, yes.
as you know very well.
I do.
As you
Swindon
know
Town won it in 1969.
Yes, they did. I do
There you
remember
go,
we've discussed
Steve.
it every time.
I always discuss it.
We don't mention the League
The only
Cup,
bit of
we bring
football
up
knowledge
Swindon
I
Town.
had.
Swindon Town.
My hometown.
So-
Come on, the Robins.
Southampton beat Manchester City 2-0, which
Right.
nobody expected.
Oh.
Because Southampton are having a terrible time. And in Manchester City, we know how good they are, but Carabao Cup, they've won it so many times as well. So
Did they put up their full team, Manchester City?
Interesting you say that, because it started off quietly, but then they thought, OK, now we'll bring the big guns on. They bring on Kevin De Bruyne, and also they bring in Erling Haaland as well, who is... as
He's
we
the
know,
one who keeps scoring goals.
He's the one that keeps scoring goals, although he didn't yesterday.
Oh.
So couldn't manage it yesterday. So fantastic result for Southampton. Nottingham Forest beat Wolves. Hi-ho, Wolverhampton.
Hi-ho, Wolverhampton.
Yeah,
That didn't do
it's
much
like,
for
oh
them.
no, Wolverhampton, they're going to start singing for the Carabao Cup. Now, that went to penalties. So the semi-final, Newcastle against Southampton, Manchester United against Nottingham Forest, and no sign of Swindon Town, unfortunately.
Manchester United will win, will they?
I think Newcastle will win. I have a feeling about Newcastle.
Right.
First time in the League Cup final since '76.
Talking about winning, World Cup winner Messi.
Yes.
Back on the pitch for the first time since Qatar.
Yeah, he looked fantastic, and first time since Qatar. They were playing Angers, playing for PSG in France. All the team wore tributes to Pelé, wear Pelé T-shirts, whereas Messi he's up there with Pelé. He's the greatest footballer that's ever seen.
Who is the greatest player, Pelé or Messi?
It's a generational thing. It really is. Whoever you speak to, Pelé was up to 1970, then you've got Maradona, and then you've got Messi.
Well,
so they're players of their...
No, exactly.
He did cheat, but I tell you what,
that rules
he
him
was half
out.
a good footballer. So cheat doesn't count, so he's out the
Yeah.
What's a cheat doesn't count?
They've all cheated.
Sport.
They've all done
Yeah,
a
but
bit
not
of
as
cheating
publicly
in
as
their time.
that.
OK, fair enough.
Hand of God, hand of a cheat.
So
Quite.
shall we go with Pelé then, because he's...
I'm going to go for Messi.
OK,
There
go
we
with
go.
Messi.
Across
But
the
anyway,
board.
played last night.
Important things.
Where's he going to go?
I'm just saying to Isabel, he's not very good looking either, Messi.
You don't think so?
No.
Well, it's just taste.
Isabel
You
agrees.
can't have it all.
No.
You know, you can't be one of the
And he has
best
got-
players in the
hundreds of
world
millions.
and gorgeous.
And as far as football's concerned, beauty's only skin deep, and you know that.
OK.
OK, but he's a fantastic footballer.
Right.
Which is all that counts when it comes to
Yes.
football. What about the tennis? Shall I mention the tennis?
Yes,
Yeah.
please, because Andy Murray's got a cracking, as in awful, opening round.
Well, you know, if you're going to go anywhere, you've got to beat the big boys at some point, and Andy Murray's going to play Matteo Berrettini, so that is going to be tricky.
He's a big seed.
He is. Jack Draper, I mean, this is the one you've got to worry
Yes.
for, and this is Jack Draper, who's had a very good...
He's
very
our big
good time.
hope.
He is our big hope, but he's drawn against Rafa Nadal.
You're joking.
Oh.
In the first round?
In the first round. The current title holder, Rafa Nadal. So, again, if you're going to do anything, it's going to be, he's got to play the big ones.
Yeah, well,
But
Nadal's
first
looking
round, though,
dangerous, isn't he, at the moment, again?
You want to get a little bit...
What about Kyrgios?
Kyrgios has got Roman Saturin. Now, Kyrgios also features... There's a new documentary, because you know the Drive to Survive documentary, which was all about Formula One, that was on Netflix. There's a new one, which is all about tennis, which comes out tomorrow. And what they also want to do is try and get a lot of the younger generation to get involved in tennis. I didn't realise how removed they are. But
Really?
they start off, apparently, with the first episode, which actually explains how tennis scoring works. it's like, well, this is 15, and then you get 30, and then you get 40. So that surprises me. But a very much an insider's look, and they're doing a golf one as well.
Yeah, but I don't want them to glorify the bad boy image. Tennis, he is the bad boy of tennis.
Do you not like that?
I like that he's a fantastic athlete and a fantastic tennis player. I don't need the histrionics. And what I love about Wimbledon and the whites and the real tradition of tennis is that it's very, gentleman.
Yeah. And look, the best tennis player in history, Federer.
Federer, gorgeous and such a gent.
Such a gent.
McEnroe?
Not a gent.
No.
But great box office.
No, I
know.
You've
got to have the good and the bad.
Federer.
Surely it makes it exciting.
Federer almost balletic on the court.
Absolutely.
Incredible.
If everybody was the same, what kind of sport would
True.
You've got to have a bit of everything.
Bit of
it's
colour.
us talking about them. So I'm all for Kyrgios. Sometimes he oversteps the line, but I enjoy a little bit of that. And then when they lose, it makes you enjoy it.
Is Emma Raducanu out yet?
No, she's...
Stop it.
Still not sure. You leave Emma alone, OK? She's a US Open winner.
Great.
We know that the career is done in reverse. You do the big thing first and then it goes in the other direction. We're still hopeful for Emma, but she's still young. She still has time.
She's got plenty of modelling contracts to pull back on.
Stop it.
Don't go well on the court.
She did a good job opening the Christmas lights at Harrods, didn't she? Naomi Osaka...
You're as bad as he is.
No, she did do a good job. What was wrong with that? She did do a good job turning the lights. I thought she looked lovely.
Naomi Osaka is not taking part in the Australian Open because she announced, 3 weeks ago, she said she wouldn't be playing. And we're thinking, well, why? Two-time winner of the Australian Open, and tweeted a picture of a scan.
It's lovely news.
Did Williams play when she was pregnant?
Yes, and she was back on the pitch, or whatever you call it, on the court.
Come on, dear.
After about 3 weeks or something, so the precedent's been set.
I think she was 9 months pregnant when she won the US Open. I mean, that's how good she is.
She was extraordinary.
But Naomi Osaka says she will be back next year, and she talks about the fact that she wants her kid to be able to see. She refers to her as the kid,
The kid.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, early
anyway,
days.
But once the baby's born, she's very excited about that, and then she'll continue with the tennis.
Lovely news. All right, we'll end on a happy note. Paul, thank you very much indeed.
Congratulations, Diane.
On the pitch. What am I like? Right.
After the break, we're going through the papers
We
with
are.
Freddie Gray, Stephanie Tetchy.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are going to take a look at your newspapers now. Favourite part of the programme. And I have to say, another channel recently announced that they've stopped doing pay-per-views. I was so thrilled.
All the better for us.
Yeah, all the better for us. So if you want pay-per-views, come here for that. We are your front pages today. Retirement dreams have been dashed for millions, says the Express, as many older employees face no option but to continue working.
And in my newspaper, the Daily Mail, a damning report which finds 4 in 10 women struggle to get help while giving birth, and more than half of maternity units are failing to meet safety standards.
The Telegraph highlights worries that 750,000 households could default on their mortgages.
And it's the same old Boris Johnson, according to the Daily Mirror. A source claims that Number 10 staff shredded Partygate documents ahead of that Commons inquiry into the issue.
And Mick Lynch won't give an inch, says the Metro. We were just discussing
What
how
a great
good the headline
headline.
writer is at the Metro. The Union Chief told the Commons Transport Select Committee that he will never accept driver-only trains.
I think Mick Lynch lives in an alternative planet, because we've already had driver-only trains. We've had them for 30 flipping years in 30% of the country.
But I think he's clicked. A lot of people haven't realised, and he thinks he's onto something with that. Because a lot of people go, oh, I didn't know I was only a driver on the train. What happens if someone attacks me or I'm ill or whatever? Anyway, we are joined to go through the papers one more time, or the second time of 3. Freddie Gray, Deputy Editor of The Spectator, and Stephanie Tetchy, Showbiz reporter, joining us for that. Good morning to you both. Did we want to talk about haircuts to start off with?
What has gone on with your hair?
We'll start every section with a...
Yeah, let's do it.
I think we should talk about how fine your hair's looking.
Well, that's very
Well, I must say, you are looking very suave today.
I'm liking a little whiff, Andrew.
Do I not normally look
No, you do, but I think your holiday has really,
refreshed. Holiday's been good for me. I disappeared up the Nile, or is it down the Nile? Great place if you haven't done it, all those temples. But no, it's a good break. But of course, we've got the lovely Khan sorting me out.
We do. Oh, yes, the best makeup artist in the business. So what's your excuse, Freddie?
Yeah.
I went to the wrong hairdresser.
So you got shaved at the sides, but
I
you
said
didn't shave...
on the side, a bit like yours to the hairdresser.
But you didn't shave
He
your
was
face.
a young, trendy guy.
But he didn't shave your face.
He didn't shave my face. Second time you've picked me up on that.
Yeah. Late night, dear.
I thought, well, if it's... No, nothing to do with late night. I've given up booze.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is it...
What, forever?
No.
Just dry January?
No, not dry January till Easter.
Oh, right, OK, like an early Lent.
Early Lent, a full Lent.
Well, you might be interested in the next segment, actually. After the papers, we're going to be talking this morning about this alternative to alcohol, which gives you the benefits without the hangover. We'll talk about... Actually, why don't you stay for that? That would be entertaining. Yes, stay for that. Why not? An invitation to you. Speaking of which, let's talk about parties, shall we? Freddie, front of the Times, Boris Johnson at the Carlton Club bragging about his leaving do.
Well, Partygate is back in the papers. I wonder if this has something to do with all the stories going around that Boris Johnson's sort of making a threat, is now a threat again to Rishi Sunak. Every time that sort of comes up, you're going to see stories about Partygate clobbering him again. And he made this joke saying the most socially distanced, but unsocially distanced party in the UK. I mean, yes, we go back to the horrible hypocrisy of the fact that they weren't following the rules that they set. But I wonder how angry people still are about Partygate. I think it's sort of disappeared as a story, and it's become a sort of Westminster thing that people bat around, that most people just think...
But it might become a big political issue, Freddie, because, as you know, he's got to go before this the Privileges Committee inquiry, chaired by Harriet Harman, senior Labour figure, who's made it absolutely clear in her views he lied to Parliament over whether the rules were broken, and this whole committee inquiry is to establish whether he knowingly misled Parliament. And if the committee finds he did and recommends his suspension, that could be no more Boris Johnson. Game over. By-election, which he'd lose.
It's a very sort of British version of the Donald Trump story in America, where, you know, at some point they're going to get him on something that means he can't be Prime Minister again. And there is this, I probably shouldn't talk about it on breakfast television, but there is the part of this story which is that some of Boris Johnson's aides had sex during one of the parties.
Wow.
Which is quite shocking.
Well, you say it's quite shocking. In Westminster circles, there is, from what I'm told, quite a lot of rumours of that sort of stuff going on within the Palace of Westminster.
I always hear these rumours, but I've
never witnessed it or experienced it.
Just frustrated nobody's asked it.
Well, yeah, exactly.
I just was curious, Freddie, because they unveiled a portrait of Boris Johnson at the Carlton Club, because at the Carlton Club...
You've got a picture of it there? It's gorgeous, isn't it? It's in the Telegraph, I think. Anyway.
I think it looks really good, actually.
Somebody put it on the front.
He looks rather dashing and good-looking.
Oh, there it is. You actually had it just there.
Portrait.
There you go.
Here it is. Look.
Sorry, it's worth showing you because it is a nice one.
Boris Johnson.
Did you say Boris Johnson?
On this camera here, yeah.
Dashing and good-looking.
Do you think he looks good looking in this stuff?
Oh, hold it up a smidge. Oh, it's a bit of a tough.
Okay. Well, so every Tory Prime Minister has their portrait in the Carlton Club, but will they extend the same courtesy to Liz? Remember her trust.
44 days.
44 days.
I think she deserves.
I think they have to.
Right.
I think they have. If you're going to have every Prime Minister, you've got to.
Yeah.
But I saw her in Westminster a couple of days ago with her security detail.
Which she keeps for life.
Which actually, given how much the Russians hate her, is probably needed. You do think that's going to be very expensive for
it means she's got a car and a driver for life.
For life.
She is entitled also, as a former Prime Minister, to an additional £115,000 to run her parliamentary office. I've written that she's not going to take it. I think there'll be a bit of a fuss if she does. But she's going nowhere because she's just hired a new press officer.
What are her other earning potential? I mean, Boris Johnson's making an absolute killing since leaving.
On making speeches.
Theresa May?
Yes, best paid external stuff.
100,000 from Saudi Arabia.
I don't think Liz Truss planned to be Prime Minister for 44 days. I think she was in it for the long haul, but unfortunately she just wasn't the woman for the job. But I think she had good intentions, and in that sense she should still be respected for wanting to lead the country through the crisis that we are in now.
Some people whose mortgage rates are going up, though, won't be so charitable about Liz Truss, because some of that will be blamed on the disastrous budget of her and Kwasi Kwarteng. Remember him?
Well, I do remember him.
Remember him, Kwasi Kwarteng?
Yes, I do. He's disappeared.
Yeah.
Liz's bestie.
Yeah.
Now, we started by talking about alcohol, and we're back onto it, Stephanie. The Mail focusing on facial recognition software to be used to check that customers are over 18. What if you're eternally youthful?
That was what I was thinking. Because they're using this AI, which has been created by a firm called Yachty, and it's within 18 months. So you could be 18, but it gives or takes 18 months, so you could be turned away if you're 18 looking like you're 17. But the reason why they're bringing this in, because it said that every day there's 1,300 incidents of violence against shopkeepers who are asking people for their ID and asking them their
I would
age for
kiss
alcohol.
someone if they asked me for ID. I always wait for them to ask, but they never do.
I would love to turn back the clock. But obviously a lot of people are saying, you know, it's just kind of like a Big Brother thing where they want to kind of store your data, but they said as soon as your face is scanned, your pictures will be deleted. But if you are under 25, this is where it contradicts itself, because it's saying if you're under 25, someone's still going to have to come and check you. So I don't know what's the point of these facial scans if you're under 25, you will need to be checked. But it's been rolled out in retailers such as Tesco, Asda and Morrison's.
OK, well, I don't like the sound of that.
No.
As you say, I'd be very flattered if the machine told me I was young.
But do they say they'll delete it? Do they?
Of course they won't. They'll sell it to someone.
Save it.
Freddie, serious story from you about the Ukraine, Putin replacing this awful general. What's going on here?
Well, this is another indication from Russia, because you can't really believe anything that the Kremlin says, that they are not happy with how the war is going. Clearly, it's not going according to plan for Vladimir Putin. And a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, actually, he brought in General Sergei Surovikin, who is...
Very good.
I think I probably got that wrong, but let's go with it.
Sounded good.
He was known as General Armageddon because of the brutality and efficiency with which he dealt with Syria. And it was thought that he would kind of, be the kind of hard man that would sort the war out for Russia. He's hit lots of problems. He pulled back from the Dnipro. The fighting in Bakhmut is not going very well. They're relying increasingly on the Wagner group, which is a group of private mercenaries, many of them ex-convicts, and they seem to be the only units that are making ground in Ukraine for Russia. So Surovikin, General Armageddon, has been shuffled out, and it's another sign in this very important story that's still going on, even though we like to forget about it now, that Russia is having severe problems, which is good for Ukraine.
You do wonder when the generals decide to shuffle Putin out.
Well, that's interesting, yes, because Shoigu, the head of the army, effectively, has been faced a lot of criticism lately from kind of Putin allies, but the fear was among the sort of Kremlin set, as we understand it, is that he might take out Putin. So we would lose Putin, but we'd get an even more...
That's the worry, isn't it?
Yeah.
It comes next.
It's not on the papers list, but since we're talking war, can we just discuss the pact yesterday made between Japan and the UK? And also, I noticed that the Americans now promising to send defences over to try and shore things up around China. Did anyone else get the feeling yesterday that these kinds of these pacts, these agreements, these deals being made actually makes me feel less safe than I did before, because it indicates the level of threat?
We're moving towards a Cold War. We're almost in Cold War stage, and it could go hot any moment over Taiwan. I mean, a lot of it boils down to this chip war, Biden banning exports to China of chips, for computer chips, which is sort of the most important thing, really, for the modern global economy. China's now fighting back, going to block access to rare earth materials, which is how we make chips. It's going to get very, very serious over the next few years. You have genuine superpower strategic rivalry, which we haven't had for some time.
Yeah, frightening.
I think it's easy to kind of sweep underneath the carpet that, all this stuff is going on, but I think it is key that these discussions are being made beforehand and that no one's really caught off guard.
Well, like you say, I mean, how many days have we been talking about Prince Harry this week?
Yeah.
And, in the scheme of things, these sorts of issues are much, much more important. But since I mentioned him...
Let's talk about that.
Well, or we could take a leaf out of the Stars book.
The Whinger.
It's a great front page, although slightly self-defeating, I think, from the Star. But they're saying, sling your hook, Sunbeam. They've banned Harry coverage, and I like this full story, not inside.
Brilliant.
So they're no longer going to do a Harry. But I mean, what are they going to talk about?
Oh yeah, how long is that really going to last?
They've said at least a week.
I'll give it 2 days.
He must surely have done. There can be no more to say, no more.
Oh, there'll be more.
Well, there's more books coming.
Well, that's what everyone said.
Is she writing a book as well?
Yes,
The
apparently
dreaded
she is.
Duchess.
Gosh, she has to get stuff off her chest as well. But that's what people said after the Netflix series. They said, they've got nothing else to say. And Harry's come out with this book. I'm currently listening to audio, and it's like 11 hours left. And it's just like each minute...
He's done it himself, hasn't he, the recording?
Yes, he has, which I think is much better to hear him explain the story and stuff. But I think Harry and Meghan are the ex-royals who are going to keep on giving for many years to come.
He's just the... inability and unwillingness to accept responsibility for anything is staggering. And it's even the press's fault for the fact he's been condemned by any military leader who's spoken about the fact he talked about killing 25 Taliban fighters. It's the way the press spun it. No, he put it in the memoir and it was reported.
Well, I got given the book for my birthday, which is the best thing. No, well, because I don't have to pay for it. I can groan about being given to it and then read it fanatically, which is what I'm doing. I think what's interesting to me from it is that he's not very democratic in his view of the world, for all his sort of woke ideology. He objects to the media, obviously because of what happened with his mother, but also because he says in the book, we used to have divine status, now we're just picked apart like flies. And what he really objects to is the fact that people get to say what they want.
And you could see that in his interview with Bradby. He didn't like being challenged, he didn't like being questioned, he wants control of the narrative, he doesn't want a free press. In many ways, he just wants to be a dictator. I think it's really distasteful. Can we end on a positive note, though? We're a bit squeezed for time, so we want to talk about alcohol again in a minute. But this is a really lovely story, the front of the Times, and I just totally agree with it.
Yeah, so it was Caroline Flack who, famously said, be kind. And now an NHS, a new survey that they've done has suggested that people who suffer from depression or mild anxiety, a way to alleviate their symptoms is by them actually helping others. I think people have this stereotype, if you're going through depression or anxiety, that you're not of no use to other people. But they said, doing this study with 122 people who have anxiety, by them doing little things for people, whether it's taking out their bins or writing positive notes, it actually helped them to feel better about themselves. I think, when people say they're depressed or anxiety, a lot of people just offer them medication or say, oh, you have to talk about it. But I think actually getting them to be active and helping others will be good mood boosters.
Perhaps Harry should start putting people's bins out. He might start feeling better.
I did.
Good lesson for Prince Harry. Think of others and not yourself.
I did realise the irony of saying I totally agree with being kind after I just slated Harry, so I do hold my hands up for that. But, there's a limit.
There's a limit to kindness.
Anyway, we will have more from Stephanie and Freddie again just after 7. We look forward to it. Thank you both very much.
Now, it's January and many of us are trying to get through it without drinking.
I am trying.
She's trying. And Freddie Gray, we've discovered, is giving up till Easter.
Amazing.
Day 12.
Day 12, doesn't he know? He's counting them down. Well, what about trying a non-alcoholic drink that actually mimics the effects of booze, so losing your inhibitions, perhaps dancing on the table, but without any of the negatives associated with it?
So neuroscientists have created a new category of botanical spirit that claims to do just that.
Well, let's get all the details from the Chief Scientific Officer at GABA Labs, Professor David Nutt. A very good morning to you. We are all ears. Tell us more.
Well, what we have done, you've introduced it rather well. We've created a botanical spirit which targets the sites in the brain that give you the good effects of alcohol, the sociability, the conviviality, the relaxation, but not the sites in the brain which cause the problems, like severe intoxication, loss of memory, and hangover. And this is available now as a ready-made drink that you can buy called Sentia.
So it's a mind-altering substance that is legal. I mean, does it have impacts on reactions and things like that? I mean, for example, can you drive a car after having taken it?
Well, we don't recommend anyone driving a car if they're affected in any way by anything. That would apply to whether you had a cold or flu or whatever. So if you're affected, you shouldn't drive. But it doesn't affect the brain anything like as much as alcohol does, because it's much more targeted than alcohol. Alcohol is a little bit, like a sledgehammer to the brain. It affects many of the chemicals in the brain. But we're targeting just the one that gives you the desirable effects of alcohol. And we're doing it at a level which has a plateau, it has a ceiling effect. So even if you drank the whole bottle, you wouldn't get completely blasted.
What does it taste of?
Oh, this particular drink tastes like a vermouth. It's made to be like a vermouth that you can drink neat on ice, or you can mix it. And most people mix it with either tonic or Coke or orange juice or apple juice.
And how much would it cost a bottle, or if they would serve it in the pub, what would a measure cost, Professor?
Well, we call it a GABA spirit, so it's priced alongside other spirits. So it's about 25 to 30 pounds a bottle, like a range gin.
Freddie Gray's still in the studio with us. If you wanted to ask a question, you're welcome to do so on camera 9. Yeah.
I've tried Sentia. I think it's rather good, actually, quite tasty. I didn't really feel the effects so much. But as I understand it, Professor Nutt, you've actually developed something else, haven't you, that's a bit more serious as a drug, but it hasn't got through the patenting. Is that right?
Oh. Yes, I have a bottle of it here, actually. Yes, this is the future. So Sentia is the present. This is the future. The future is what we call Alcarel, and Alcarel is a small molecule which we've designed to specifically target those effects we want from alcohol. But that has to go through food safety testing. The current product, just to answer one of the earlier questions, the current product is a foodstuff. So it's full of, or it's made from food grade or food supplement material, so they're all approved. This would have to go through an approval process, and that's where we are now. We're looking to get investment. We're going out for investors actually in the next few weeks to see if we can raise money to take it through the food safety testing. And in a couple of years' time, maybe 3 or 4 years' time, when it passes those tests of safety, we hope to make this available to any drinks company in the world. So instead of having alcohol in your cocktails or mocktails, you'd have mocktails with Arcarel, or you could even put it into non-alcoholic beer or non-alcoholic wine. So it will give people a completely different alternative, but a functional alternative to alcohol.
Where could we try Sentia? If I was to go out today, where would I be able to buy it?
Well, unfortunately, it's we had a bit of a rush on sales as a result of some of the dry January media. So very shortly we'll be replenishing the shelves. You can buy it online from our website, the Gabba Labs website. It's being sold in Planet Organic. It's some of the cocktail bars in London are selling it now. It makes actually an extremely nice cocktail. We're having a competition between cocktailiers to make the best, and some of them are actually really stunning. So it will become much more available in the next few weeks when we do our next production run.
It is delicious.
Endorsements from over here.
I'm going to try a cocktail of the Alcarel with the Sentia as soon as I can. When will that be possible?
Hopefully before Easter. We've got to wrap.
No, it won't. It will be. There will be. It is. The testing process does require making a lot of it and putting it through.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We've got to cut across you there, Professor Nutt. We're out of time. Lovely to get your thoughts. Thank you very much indeed. Andrew and I'll be back in just a minute with all the latest on Rishi Sunak's pledges.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGibbon from the Met Office. It's a frosty start for northern Scotland this morning, but elsewhere, further wet and windy weather, and it's wettest in the south once again. Wales, southwest England, seeing more persistent and heavy rainfall because of these weather fronts, which are bringing a large amount of wet weather into the south and the west as we start off Thursday. That low will bring some strengthening winds as well to the northwest later, but it's the rain that is the most concern for South Wales and southwest England as we start the day. Risk of further flooding because of the wet weather that we've seen recently. The most persistent rain does move through. It's replaced by showers by the afternoon, but also some brighter interludes. The strongest of the winds also begin to ease, but it stays blustery. As rain bumps into the cold air, meanwhile, across central Scotland, we can expect some snow above 400 or 500 metres. Feeling cold in the north, 5 or 6 Celsius at lower levels. It looks like it will be 12 or 13 in the south, so staying mild for England and Wales. Now, further showers drive through on Thursday evening, strengthening winds for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland and Irish Sea coast with gales in places. And it's a blustery end to the night, but with the wind coming from the northwest, it's going to be a fresher start, I think, for southern areas, even if it is frost-free. A brighter start, though, as well for the south and the east. Some sunshine at times on Friday morning, more especially into the afternoon. The skies brighten up more widely, but there'll be further showers affecting Northern Ireland, northern and western Scotland, parts of northern and central England, 1 or 2 for the southwest as well. In between the showers, we can expect it to stay breezy, and so that's going to have an effect on how it feels. It's going to feel quite chilly, I think, but temperatures slightly above average in the south, closer to normal further north. Further rain to come on Saturday, some heavy rain across North Wales and northwest England in particular. That clears to showers on Sunday, but also turns colder, with some of those showers turning to sleet and snow in Scotland.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Rishi Sunak fires the unofficial start gun on his electoral campaign as he vows to restore pride in the United Kingdom in an address to the nation.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Thursday, January the 12th. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Andrew Pearce.
Here's what's leading the news this morning.
I know this has been a tough winter. Our country faces some of the biggest challenges any of us will have seen in our lifetimes. With our economy, in our NHS, on our borders.
Rishi Sunak's pledged to tackle illegal migration and NHS waiting lists in his first party political broadcast as PM. He also touted his record in fighting inflation, but didn't mention the wave of strikes sweeping the nation.
Oddly, members of Parliament are demanding that suspended backbencher Andrew Bridgen should be banned from standing as an MP at the next election after he compared the COVID vaccine rollout to the Holocaust.
Pregnant women and new mothers are being abandoned by the NHS, a new report's found. The shocking findings by the Care Quality Commission reveals that 4 in 10 women struggle to get help from staff whilst giving birth.
And foodflation is continuing to soar. Is eating more seasonal veg the key to saving money and the planet? We're going to speak to a couple flying the flag for British farming during this terrible cost of living crisis.
Get in touch the usual way via Twitter or email. We'd love to know what you're thinking this morning. And don't forget to let us know where you're watching or listening from. So it's our top story this morning. The Prime Minister has set out his main aims for 2023 in a party political broadcast that appears to signal a shift onto an election footing.
So Rishi Sunak reiterated what he called his hard-headed common-sense approach to tackling the NHS backlog and the economy. Let's take a listen.
Under my leadership, the government's priorities are your priorities, the people's priorities. Together, we're putting your needs above politics to repair the economy, strengthen our NHS, tackle illegal migration, and restore pride in the United Kingdom, our great country.
Well, joining us now for more analysis on this and the other big stories is our political correspondent Tom Harwood and the former Liberal Democrat Minister Norman Baker. Welcome to both of you. Tom, first of all, let's get the superficial out of the way, shall we? We were just discussing that once again a politician has shown actually how difficult it is to appear on television. People always assume everyone on TV, you know, it's just easy, but actually he looks quite uncomfortable there.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like the most natural performance. Quite stilted, quite jolting at points, and it does seem that almost every single line he says has been focus grouped to the hilt, and indeed it looks like there were many different cuts throughout that clip, filmed quite a while ago, I understand, filmed last year in order to come out just last night. But it does seem like this has undergone some pretty heavy chopping and changing in the edit process to try and get that fine-tuned message. That message that we all have now heard so many times on halving inflation, growing the economy, reducing debt, cutting waiting lists and stopping the boats. I have now committed these 5
And you did it
pledges
more dynamically.
to memory, and I think we'll all be saying them for a very long time to come.
Do you think it was a missed opportunity here, Norman Baker? Because we'd had the legislation in the Commons, resisted by the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, to ensure the unions have to provide a minimum level of service in certain essential services like trains and the NHS. You didn't mention it.
Well, if Tom's right and he recorded this last year, that's, to my mind, quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, a week is a long time in politics, as Harold Wilson said a very long time ago. And that sounded out of touch. That sounded like a default broadcast that you might put together without knowing what the circumstances of the world are.
Interesting. OK, so if it had been focus grouped to the max, I mean, there is the question if it was deliberate, the omission of the strikes, or as Norman says, it just actually because it was out of date.
Yes, no, I understand it was filmed quite some time ago.
But why,
so
Tom? Why would you not do it right up to date? You're in a new year with new challenges. Why would you do
These
it
things
that
don't
way?
take long anymore. Trust me,
No.
you work in television. You can whip that out in a day.
I suppose one of the arguments, and I haven't had great in-depth conversations with people in Number 10 about this, beyond just the fact that this was filmed some time ago, I suppose the timing, the demands on the Prime Minister's time, we have heard this week, of course, he's needed to take a plane to get to, Leeds.
An RAF jet or something.
Rather than just taking a train like anyone else. Clearly, Number 10 believe that the Prime Minister's time is of the highest, is under the highest sort of pressure. And yesterday, of course, he was meeting the Japanese Prime Minister, showing him around the Tower of London, doing joint press conferences. The head of any G7 country has got a lot of pressures on their time.
Which segues perfectly onto the next question, which is about private healthcare and whether or not he uses that. I mean, do we really find it so shocking if our Prime Minister, who has such a demand on his time, needs to use the private sector? Why can't he use them? Why is that an issue?
Well, the bizarre thing is, of course, the President of the United States has his own private physician living in the White House. The President of France has a team of 4 on-hand private medical practitioners at the Élysée Palace. It is a little bit odd that the Prime Minister of this country has to sort of queue with everyone else. I would have thought that there's perhaps a need for government to roll on in a slightly different way, perhaps. But clearly, Rishi Sunak has taken the decision that he needs to be queuing with everyone else in order to run the NHS properly. I think that's somehow supposed to be the argument. But yet there is some ambiguity here. Yes, he is now registered with an NHS GP. The question is, at what point did he stop his private healthcare and switch to this? Was it just due to media pressure? Because Number 10 are being very opaque about the timeline of all of this.
It doesn't even matter if he registered. He could still use a private healthcare anyway.
And why shouldn't he?
Oh, why shouldn't he indeed? I can't get excited about him using private healthcare. No. I'm more concerned about the fact he took a plane to Leeds, actually, because the train wasn't very much longer than the plane. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes to Leeds by train. I suspect the reason for that was so he didn't bump into any rail workers.
Yeah. Well, would the trains have run anyway, because they've been on strike most of the time. But going back to the private insurance, he was asked 3 times about this in an interview on Sunday and dodged the question. He looked shifty and furtive, and he should have just taken... It's a straightforward question. People are entitled to know, and he should have just said, yes, and the reason I do is I'm a wealthy man and I'm taking pressure off the NHS.
A la Margaret Thatcher.
Because when she was asked the question, she nearly knocked the reporter's head off when she
Well, we
answered
get
it.
the same questions asked to politicians about private education for their children. The same issues come up there.
Well, and I support the right of him to educate his children privately. I think it should be a Conservative mantra. If you want to take your children private, if you can afford it.
Well, not just a Conservative mantra. Of course, Diane Abbott famously sent her children to the City of London school, a very well...
Tony Blair went to Fettes.
1 in 7 Labour Party MPs were privately educated, and it's really interesting how they are attacking the private sector at the moment, but that's another subject.
Or interestingly, as Rishi Sunak said at Prime Minister's Questions yesterday, independent healthcare rather than private healthcare. It was an interesting sort of rebranding, perhaps, of that. But clearly, this is something that the Prime Minister has felt under enormous pressure over. His line that it's a personal matter, it's a private matter that he doesn't want to discuss, doesn't feel appropriate to discuss, didn't hold for more than about 3 days. And perhaps that does feed into this criticism that the Labour Party has been levelling against the Prime Minister for some time now, that he is pushed around by interests in his party, by interests in the media. Perhaps Rishi Sunak really does now, in the coming weeks, need to make a big stand over this minimum service level legislation, over something else, to prove that he's not just pushed around by any interest that comes...
I think he feels vulnerable, actually. I think he feels vulnerable from Boris Johnson in the wings, and he feels vulnerable that he's going to have bad election results in May, and he wants to try and protect his position. So what he's doing is caving in, really, to his Tory MPs to try and avoid any more rebellions.
Well, let's talk about...
The Tory MPs would want him to have been upfront about that. But if you were in the Commons, would you be voting against this anti-strike legislation?
Well, I would, actually.
Keir Starmer's voting. Why?
I would, because I think you cannot... It doesn't work. You can't force people at gunpoint to turn up at work. And if you make real workers turn up at gunpoint to their railway stations or their trains...
No one's talking about gunpoint.
Well,
I mean, I think that kind of language is... Yeah, OK.
It is, actually.
Norman, they manage it in France, Denmark, Germany, Slovenia, Norway, Portugal, Lithuania...
I don't know how well they manage it, but the point is,
Spain.
if they turn up at work... and they're told to turn up, what's to stop them phoning in sick, first of all, not turning up? Secondly, when they turn up, what's to stop them not working to rule or otherwise...
So just let them run the show?
I'm not letting them run the show.
You are?
I mean, there's a right to strike in this country, and I think we're cutting away basic civil liberties in this country in a dangerous way. And you know, we'll all end up with the threat of people being sacked. You know, you can't sack nurses, you can't sack train drivers, actually. There aren't enough of them.
Police officers can't go on strike, Norman, nor can people in the army. So why are they different? Why can't we introduce this in certain areas of the country, like NHS?
Well, there is a case, I think, for blue light action being covered in that way, because that's an emergency. Rail workers are not an emergency.
Ironically, however, it was the blue light ambulance drivers who were the only people under the last wave of NHS strikes who didn't agree a minimum safety level. Because, of course, the nurse unions did agree with the government that a certain level of service should be provided. That's what this legislation would be trying to guarantee, something that happened anyway with the nurses. I don't think that would have changed the situation.
But can you provide a minimum level of service anyway in places like A&E? You know, quite clearly they're on strike because they feel like the minimum level that's there isn't adequate anyway. The argument is there's not enough, whether it's a strike day, whether it's a work day. It seems as though, you know, it's just... Anyway, I don't know.
Interestingly, through the process of this legislation, the government's been saying, in parallel with passing the legislation, they'll be consulting over what these minimum service levels should look like.
Yeah,
but so they don't have all the answers.
And they can look across the water to Europe, your beloved European Union, where most European Union countries have exactly that sort of legislation, and we can borrow some of the ideas from the old EU.
Let's look at this politically,
You should support
Andrew.
that.
Let's look at this politically. The reason this is coming forward is because it's red meat for the Tory backbenchers and pile on Tory...
No, it's to stop the unions holding the country to ransom.
No, it's because the Tory MPs wanted, and Snoop wants a policy that they can rally around. And the fact of the matter was, if you look what happened before Christmas with the rail workers, they were very, very close to a deal with the RMT just before Christmas. And in number 10, it was number 10, at the last minute bounced in this requirement for driver-only operation. Now, whatever you think about driver-only operation on doors, that's not the issue. The issue was it bounced in the last minute, I think, to scupper the talks. I think the government quite likes strikes.
We've had driver-only trains, Norman, for 30 years.
I know. I'm not talking about the issue. I'm talking about the fact that in terms of negotiation...
Why would the government like strikes on the railways?
Because it plays to their base.
I don't think it does. I think people are sick to death of the strikes.
It hurts the economy, which hurts them, surely.
Nothing seems to work.
No, I think what they're interested in having a fight with the unions, and I think they're interested in bludgeoning the unions because that suits their base to do that, and I think they think there's political advantage in doing that.
So, Norman, you would vote against the legislation. What would you do? Would you pay? You would agree that there shouldn't be driver-only operated trains, and you would pay them what they're asking? I mean, what
as a matter of fact, I agree with driver-only operated trains, but that wasn't. What I was saying was that was wrong to bounce it at the last minute in the negotiations, because that was just a crass thing to do.
So they can get more money, but no progress in working practices.
No, look, I mean, no, Andrew, I've been on this programme many times arguing that the deal for the rail workers is a decent pay rise coupled with a change to terms and conditions to get rid of some of the ancient inaccuracies which are still there.
Like not having driver-only trains?
Well, maybe so, but you don't bounce it in the last-minute negotiations. You just don't negotiate in that way. That's what went wrong with that particular...
But we are where we are, so what would be the answer to this? I mean, there was some suggestion they could try and separate out the driver-only operated trains issue, and then there would be a deal done. So that would be your advice to Mark Harper?
I think where we got to now is there has to be a deal. The unions will give way, in my belief, on certain conditions and terms which are out of date. They will do that. I think that's part of the negotiation. And they will get a decent pay rise. And they get the strike out of the way. Then you come back to that issue of driver-only operation.
I'm just going to remind reviewers and listeners of the headline in the Metro: Lynch won't give an inch. That's Mick Lynch.
That's a tactical point. That's not...
No, he's an uncompromising militant.
No,
he does not want to do a deal with the Tories.
An inch. And I'm telling you from my inside knowledge that they were very close to deal in December, and he was giving an inch. He was giving more than an inch.
Well, there we go. All right, well, look, Norman Baker, Tom Harwood, fascinating discussion at the top of the 8 this morning. We are going to stick with the train theme and cross to Paddington, because today London's Elizabeth line, only talked about it opening a few weeks ago, wasn't it? Is seeing walkouts in a dispute over pay.
It comes as Number 10 signals it's optimistic about a deal with the rail unions, where that optimism comes from, to end the strike action, which has paralysed parts of the country.
Well, joining us now is GB News national reporter Theo Chicumba, who's at Paddington Station. I don't know how much you were able to hear that debate, Theo, but lots of discussion about whether or not a realistic solution can be reached in all of this.
That's right. Well, for now, for today, there hasn't been a conclusive answer to what workers here want. So particularly here at Paddington today, it is the TSSA, so that's the Transport Salary Staff Association, and of course the Prospect Union. They are asking for a pay rise, particularly for those who work on infrastructure here on the Elizabeth line. The central part of the train service today, particularly from Paddington toward Abbeywood, isn't working, but there are some minimal level services going to places like Reading, Maidenhead, and of course Heathrow as well. So it's another day of disruption for those looking to get the train, whether it's in and out of London or within the city today. Just in terms of the wider picture, we've heard about what's been happening over the last few days with conversations, particularly Mick Lynch, who's been critical of the government over the last couple of months in terms of the deal that's been offered to railway workers.
To cut across you, I'll tell you why. So much background train noise and passenger noise. Listen, we'll try and sort that connection out. We'll get the latest from you a little bit later on in the programme. But
if only it was the noise of the Elizabeth line.
If only it was. It's not today. Right, 8:15 is the time. We'll bring you up to date with the latest headlines.
Well, we've got heavy winds of up to 60 miles an hour in parts of the UK today. A yellow weather warning for heavy rain in Wales and southwest England. That's going to be in force until 5 o'clock this afternoon. The Met Office is warning of possible power cuts, dangerous driving conditions and delays to public transport. Isabel, the whole point about lots of wind is the wind turbines spin even faster,
I know.
and yet we're going to get power cuts.
Power cuts, well, you know, it's tricky as old wind. Leo Varadkar and Sir Keir Starmer will meet political parties at Stormont later as talks progress over the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Irish Premier will join the Labour leader in Belfast to discuss the post-Brexit deadlock.
And this is worrying. Up to 750,000 households are at risk of defaulting on their mortgages over the next 2 years. That's according to the Financial Conduct Authority. More than 200,000 households have already fallen behind on their payments, and that was at the end of last June.
Now, after the break, we're talking about that hateful man, Andrew Tate. This is after Rishi Sunak was urged to tackle radicalisation in our schools. Lots of vulnerable young men idolising this horrible individual. All of that, a full insight into what he's all about after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Still to come on the programme this morning, half of people who get a puppy say that their lives changed more than they expected, and it's actually caused rifts with loved ones. At 8:45, celebrity vet Dr. Scott Miller will tell us how to beat the puppy blues.
Stick to cats, it's easy.
You don't get that.
My old mate Carol Malone, she, the Daily Express columnist, well known to GB News viewers, she'll be giving us her take on the big stories of the day.
And keep your thoughts coming in on all of the big topics of the day. You know what to do.
A food blogger from Northamptonshire is encouraging people to save money and support British farmers by eating more seasonal veg, but not Brussels.
Well, it comes as food inflation rises to more than 13%. That is the highest rate on record. Our East Midlands reporter has more on this, and I'm afraid Will Hollis will be telling you Brussels are on the menu.
In Yelvertoft, the final few sprouts in Millie's garden are making their way onto the menu tonight. At a time when costs are increasing, the food blogging mum says eating seasonal veg grown locally instead of imported stuff can save you cash, and growing your own is even cheaper.
So at the moment we're in winter and brassicas are in season at the moment. So your Brussels sprouts and your kale, full of iron and vitamins. They're so fresh, and buying in season means that it's low food miles, but it also is cheaper on the purse as well.
Last month, food inflation rose to 13.3%, according to the British Retail Consortium, the highest rate on record.
Come on, girls. Come on.
As a farming family, Millie and her husband Andrew know firsthand how the cost of food is challenging consumers.
In this particular building, we've got some of this year's spring-born calves, which have recently been weaned. So they're just getting used to being inside now. They've come in because it's so wet outside now.
Andrew's been a farmer for 12 years.
The cost of production to produce these animals has more or less doubled to us in the last 18 months or so. The cost to the consumer, unfortunately, will have to go up, because if it doesn't go up, we will evidently not stop doing it, so therefore food has to go up.
The UK food and farming industry pumps £120 billion into the economy. The National Farmers Union says that farmers produce healthy, affordable, quality food to world-leading standards, all while protecting and enhancing our precious countryside. And that buying British produce not only means you're supporting our farmers, but also that you're cutting down on food miles. Millie started blogging about the meals she makes to try and connect others with food grown by British farmers. Now she's released a new e-cookery book endorsed by Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal. It's filled with simple meals for busy parents.
For me, sausages are a real hero ingredient, and it's one of the things that I always have in my fridge or in my freezer. A packet of sausages can be as low as sort of £1.50, £2. For me, it's really important to be able to cook a meal from scratch and feed my family well using fresh seasonal produce, which I know that will make them happy and healthy. And all of these meals, they're quick, they're very easy, they're no fuss.
While increasing costs are unavoidable, the effect of rising prices doesn't have to mean a drop in the standard of your meals. Will Hollis for GB News in Yelvertoft.
You convinced Brussels going to be happening for you?
They're nice if they're cooked not for too long.
OK.
I've had too many Brussels sprouts which turn up like constantly.
Do you know a really good way to do them is to stick them in the microwave and steam them?
Oh.
So if you bought them in a packet and you just pierce the packet, it actually, although it sounds like a cooking faux pas, microwaved Brussels are cooked to perfection. Just a couple of minutes.
We shouldn't be buying vegetables in packets, should we?
Oh, yeah, no, that's true. OK, we'll put them in a steaming contraption in the microwave. Anyway, from your grocer.
Yes.
Now, look, lots of you will have heard of influencers. The question is, have you heard of manfluencers? They're male influencers who use social media to spread hateful views and content on women. And, of course, the most well-known being that awful man, Andrew Tate.
And Tate is currently detained in Romania on human trafficking and rape charges, but many parents are worried his influence is harming their sons, some of whom are very young.
Well, we're joined by journalist and father of two, Martin Daubney, regular on this show. Good morning to you, Martin. Look, I did a bit of research into this.
Morning.
I'm a parent myself, got a lovely young son. Terrifies me to think that the ideology, and that's what it is, it's utter nonsense that Andrew Tate spreads, is revered by not just what you might consider vulnerable boys, but across the board. I mean, his name is well known, and it starts off with this idea of selling sort of flashy cars and a fast lifestyle, making a lot of money. But actually, his messages are absolutely vile, including blaming rape victims for their rape and basically saying women's place is to stay at home and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, Tate is a brazen opportunist, and he's preying on young men who often feel listless and purposeless, especially in the internet age, where competition is high. Competition to be wealthy, competition to be sexually successful, to stand out from the crowd. And he's a salesman. He's a snake oil salesman, and he's not the first, and he won't be the last. Now, awareness is very high, but I just want to reassure your viewers, also the message out there to combat it is very high. My son is 13. His peer group all talk about Andrew Tate, but so do the teachers, and they're giving awareness lessons. My missus is a teacher in a primary school, and even the teachers there are being taught about people like Tate. So the fight back is in place, it's strong, and actually, even though a lot of people know about Tate, the vast majority of boys think he's a complete idiot. They don't want to be seen as sexist or transphobic or racist. It's the worst sin. And one of the advantages of teachers being so woke these days is that they are so aware to take poison. The defence is in place, and that's completely in contrast to when we saw the great porn panic of about 2013. I've been in hundreds of schools across the UK. I've spoken to about 35,000 British teenagers on how to stay safe on the internet around pornography, and the defence in place about Tate is really robust. Back then, it was terrible, and that's why they had to get wrong-uns like me into school.
He set up a university, did Andrew Tate, so people could subscribe and pay him inordinate amounts of cash, kind of bankrolled him effectively, giving people's degrees on how to basically emulate his disgusting lifestyle, which was sort of imprisoning women and using them as sex objects and as if they haven't got brains or anything to contribute, and probably most of them far bigger brains than him, let's be honest. But what does it say about society if people are looking for this kind of message? If people are, I honestly just despair. I spent some time, as I say, looking into this yesterday, and I thought, what about this is appealing? What about this is in any way attractive? Are we all doomed? I feel like we are.
No, we're not all doomed, and I'll explain why. First of all, he is offering a solution that's a click away and it's quick fix. Young people especially want a quick fix. They order everything on their phones. So why not lifestyle advice on how to get richer and more sexually successful? That's what he's offering. A subscription-based model. It's about $40 a month. It's not cheap. It's way more expensive, say, for example, than Netflix. But he's offering a solution. And the particular types of boys that are most vulnerable are those without father figures in their life. There's a huge prevalence of fatherlessness. There's 300,000 couples split per year. 1 in 3 children will grow up without a father. And the toxic masculinity, if you like, of people like Tate and also ISIS and gang members come into these listless boys' lives and offer a solution, a father figure, a proxy father figure. Now, I've just finished editing a book called The War on Dads and Children, written by a good friend of mine, Vincent McGovern. He talks about how the British system is against fathers. It stops fathers getting access to their children in the courts. The legal aid system is biased. The answer is out there. The answer is decent, ordinary men talking to their sons, because it's sons that we're talking about here, and daughters, about the risks, and making them safe. And so let's hear it for the dads, because let me tell you this, if you're worried about the boys, I speak to my boys about this. I have an open conversation, non-judgmental. Here's how you do it. You don't say, right, I've heard that you're going to be a sexist because you listen to Andrew Tate. You said, I've heard there are some guys out there trying to influence you. What kind of things are they saying? And get them to talk about it. And say, look, that's not right. And if you're concerned about anything, you can talk to me. Make sure your child understands they're pushing at an open door and you're there to be supportive and non-judgmental. But I don't think we should worry, Isabel and Andrew, because the vast majority of boys are wonderful and caring and will not be led astray by losers like Tate.
And if there's a parent watching this, Martin, who is worried, maybe they haven't even heard of Andrew Tate, would you encourage parents to check what their boys or their daughters are looking at on the net?
No, I would not. Again, with pornography, if they believe they're being spied upon or sniped, you create, the Sex Pistols behind me, you create prohibition, you create the Streisand effect. Oh, what's this thing I'm not allowed to go and do? What's a teenager going to do, Andrew? They're going to go and do the precise opposite. You create intrigue by making it so naughty. The best thing is to make it boring. Talk to me about it. I'm your dad. I go, God, I don't talk to my dad about pornography or anything like this. And so make it boring and make them realise that friend in you and not an enemy, and there's going to be no problem. Trust me, the vast majority of boys are wonderful, beautiful creatures, and they will not be led astray by these kind of morons.
I hope you're right, Martin. And look, I've worked with you for years. I can testify to the fact you are a lovely father, a really great dad. But you did start your career in lad mags, right? You can't pretend you didn't. Do you think that, in some ways that culture, that industry that you were part of has contributed to the kind of toxic masculinity that you are now battling against as a dad?
That's a question I asked myself when I left the magazine. I edited the magazine for 10 years. I worked in men's magazines for many more years than that. And yeah, we were, if you like, the kind of nursery slope where people got a taste for this sort of stuff. That's why I made the documentary for Channel 4 called Porn on the Brain, because my magazine was accused of being a kind of entry level to harder stuff. We scoured the land, we spoke to experts across the world, and there wasn't that link. It's not as simple as that. But you are right. that my shady heritage allowed me to go into schools and talk to young boys in a way they knew I wasn't a copper or a vicar. I wasn't going to judge them. And so the messenger is important. If you wag your finger and tell these people off and act really austere and priestly, you're going to lose the room. So in a sense, my dodgy past became quite useful when it came to become, I guess, a bit of a poacher turned gamekeeper type figure.
I might have to use your expertise at some point because I know I'm going to be wagging my finger to my son. Don't you be doing that. Let me see what you're up to. I know, but I can't do it. I can't. It's hard. I know. It's just my instinct. Martin, lovely to talk to you this morning. Good to see your face. Thanks very much indeed.
Pleasure.
And coming up, we're going to be going through the papers with Stephanie Tecci and The Spectator's Freddie Gray.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own news from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're going to have a look at some of the front pages. Retirement dreams have been dashed for millions, says the Daily Express, as many older employers they have no option but to continue working.
In your paper, Andrew, the Daily Mail, a damning report this morning has found 4 in 10 women struggling to get help whilst giving birth, and more than half of maternity units are failing to meet basic safety standards.
And The Telegraph highlights worries that 750,000 households could default on their mortgages.
The Mirror saying it's the same old Johnson. A source claims that Number 10 staff shredded Partygate documents ahead of the Commons inquiry into the matter.
And Mick Lynch, that's union leader, won't give an inch. Great headline on the front of the Metro. The union chief told the Commons Transport Committee yesterday he'll never accept driver-only trains, even though they've been in existence for 30 years.
Well, we're joined one last time to go through the papers this morning by showbiz reporter Stephanie Tetchin, regular on the show, as well as the deputy editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and also regular appearer. Welcome back to both of you. Interesting, as we're doing all the front pages there, we didn't do the front of The Guardian, but you've chosen it, Freddie, because quite fascinating cyber attack, not just on Royal Mail that we heard about yesterday evening, but also Guardian employees having their salaries hacked and all sorts of data being shared. What's going on?
Well, The Guardian had a massive attack over Christmas that disrupted its whole business. Andrew Pierce is not responsible.
No. not least because I'm so technically illiterate that I don't know where to start.
Well, one employee at The Guardian, as yet unnamed, fell for a phishing scam, which has revealed all of their passport details and so on. So he's probably not very popular in the office. And then the big story today is about the Royal Mail, which has urged people not to send parcels over abroad because of a cyber attack. The thing about the post office is that it's been so bad and so affected by these strikes that actually I'm not sure the cyber attacks will make much of a difference.
No, the Royal Mail is chaos. I mean, what a mad time to go on strike in the run-up to Christmas, the time when they do 60% of their business.
Prime Minister's Christmas card arrived here at GB News yesterday.
Amazing. I genuinely put in some of my Christmas cards to people, Happy Easter.
Yeah.
We laugh.
We have the same problem with The Spectator. I mean, we're having terrible backups.
Of course, because it's a delivery magazine.
Yeah. It's bad news. But anyway, the cyber attacks is the problem, and there's a massive surge in quite dangerous cybercrime, much of it coming from Russia, of course, possibly supported by the Kremlin. So this is a bubbling story.
It's such a big deal because so much of our lives is online. You can barely do anything without being online, whether that's paying for anything on the tube or whatever it might be, and yet it's not safe.
No, it's not. But I think I've got better at spotting emails which are, junk or phishing for information. I think you just need your wits about you when you're online, and you can't be naive in that sense. Like, I'm always extra careful about what details I'll be sharing online and to who. But obviously, it's a big market, the cybercrime market, and people will keep on trying to get people's details wherever to get that quick buck.
Yeah, I'm amazed by the number of people who still say, oh, yes, I did give them my bank details. I did give them a what? Don't give it to anybody.
Yeah. My father's a liability. He falls for
Really?
Yeah.
No, mine
He's
too.
scammed about 10 times a year.
No.
It's terrible.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's a certain age group as well, I think, in all of this, which is also awful. Let's talk about... where should we go now? Lord of the Dance. This is Inside the Times, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Michael Flatley, some bad news.
Yeah, I remember when I was about 10 years old trying to practice the river dance. I was just so obsessed with it. But unfortunately, last night he came out with a statement. Well, his agent said that he's been suffering from an aggressive form of cancer. He's currently recovering. He was sent to hospital straight for operation. They're saying that he's in the excellent care of doctors. He's previously beaten skin cancer before, but they haven't disclosed what kind of cancer he's been diagnosed with this time.
He's a remarkable man. I mean, the river dance, it's so energetic, and he revolutionised that form of dancing. And I had dinner with him a couple of years ago. He is amazing company. Really entertaining,
Which
really
is
fun.
code word for, although incredibly fit, not particularly healthy, i.e. loves the drink.
I had to be led out of the restaurant into a waiting car. He said, do you want to go onto a club? I said, I think I have to go to Accent.
Trying to keep up with him.
He's Irish, isn't he?
The gift of the Irish.
Yeah. But a fabulous guy and very charming. So we wish him well.
Wishing him a speedy recovery.
Yeah.
Freddie, we've got Emily Thornberry coming up in a little while to talk to us. Labour absolutely on the warpath with private schools, trying to take away the charitable status, and the Mail covering this story. Gillian Keegan, interesting, yesterday in Parliament, sort of launching a fight back on behalf of the independent sector.
Yes, I think the Tories think this is a good opportunity for a counter-attack on Labour on education, and that Labour are sort of playing silly identity politics almost with private schools, when 1 in 7 of them went to private schools themselves. And the Tory policy on private schools is if they can help the state sector, then that's good. And in fact, we should be making it easier and cheaper to put on private education, which is, of course, astronomically expensive for most people. But if the system was better, you'd have more cheaper private schools, which is what the Tories want to do. And so I think it is a weak spot for Labour, actually. I think they think this is a great win.
They do. They've talked, Labour ministers have talked, Shadmans have talked about this and say, this is a great policy for us. We want the Mail to keep writing about it because it's a gift. I said, you're missing the point.
Yeah.
This kicks people in the aspirations, people who want to save up and pay a bit extra to send their kids to school. And if it means thousands more kids will have to leave private schools and go into the state sector, where's the room for them?
Well, exactly. I mean, there's huge pressure on the state sector.
Already?
Yeah.
The more relief you can give the state sector, the better. So...
But let's look at the exact reason behind Labour want to do this. I mean, they're saying that they aren't entitled to charitable status. Why should they when other businesses don't get that relief from VAT, that this is a handout from the state that they don't deserve because these are people who already have a huge amount of advantages in life?
There's a lot of scepticism about the extent to which private schools fulfil their charitable obligations. I think some of them are a bit sort of token about it, but a lot of them do a lot. You know, I went to a private school and they did a lot. You know, all the facilities were available to the local community. It was a sort of very magnanimous and good thing. So no, I think removing VAT could sink a lot of these private schools into trouble, and it won't be the really posh ones that everyone's saying. It won't be them that suffer.
Because the Chinese can still afford to send their kids there, and it will be
Eaton won't be affected.
Yeah, it'll be the sort of the more affordable ones.
Yeah, and of course, what Eaton did to Prince Harry.
But Labour were in power for how many years with Blair and Brown? They never did it.
No.
Not least, Blair went to fetters in Scotland. Scotland's Eaton.
Is it one of these things that Labour will always talk about but never actually do?
More than that.
I think actually what's sad about it is it's just yet another thing that people draws a line in the sand between people and brings up an issue that is unnecessary to turn people on each other again.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked a lot about, as you say, under Blair in the 90s, there was a lot of this kind of private school versus state, so it's kind of went away for a bit. But do we really need to have everything? Are you Harry, are you William, are you Brexit, are you EU, are you private school, are you private healthcare? Let's stop trying to find things to fall out over.
Yeah. Well, Keir Starmer's got to keep the left of his party happy. Maybe this is
well, as he's broken about 8 now of the 10 pledges he made in his leadership campaign to get their support, he's probably got to stick to something.
He's keeping up with the times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where should we go? Oldest trucker in the Telegraph, Steph?
Yeah. So we were talking, about the work shy a bit earlier, but Brian Wilson has become the UK's oldest lorry driver. At the age of 90, he's just passed another health MOT, which means he will be still on the roads at 91. He started driving in the 70s, and he wakes up at 4 a.m. every day for a 12-hour shift, delivering goods to places such as Rochdale, Birmingham, and Newcastle. And I think this is quite motivational because a lot of older people I talk to, they don't want to stop working, and I don't think they should stop working. I think if your faculties are working and you can still do a job you love, I think that's quite positive. You actually find people start dying when they stop working, and we need more positive stories like this that can actually inspire people who are not so eager about work. And he says that if he does retire next year, he plans to go to Thailand with his wife. So he's still living, which is great.
I think it's amazing driving a lorry at 90. I couldn't drive a lorry at any age.
It scares me a little bit. I don't mean to be
I can drive a car now. Lorry. I've never passed my test.
How many times have you failed it?
Once.
Right.
And you've never tried again?
I failed on... I think I've mentioned this before. I failed on 9/11.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Bad omen. But no, I should. It's terrible. My children think I'm a joke.
Does Mrs. Gray drive?
She does, and resents me.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. So she has to have dry January a lot when.
Oh yeah, it's the perfect get out of jail card. You can never drive.
Well, exactly.
Genius. That's the truth, isn't it?
That's what I was thinking.
We've caught you out, Freddie.
Yes. Although, let's get back to this very impressive guy driving a lorry.
Yeah.
91, because that is... I've never tried to drive a lorry.
No.
Yeah.
It must be amazingly difficult.
I'd have thought so.
I mean, I don't mean to be mean, because it is a positive story, but, has he been retested recently? I mean, you just said that. Sorry, I missed that bit. No, but that's what scares me is, a lot of older drivers, when I think of my grandparents...
Yeah.
And shouldn't there be a compulsory test at certain ages for driving?
Yeah.
Of course there should. Maybe 70, 80, 90, but no government's going to bring it in. Because particularly a Tory government, because they need the grey vote.
Yeah.
And it would be a vote loser.
I'm just hanging on for driverless cars.
Oh, no.
I hope they'll come to my rescue.
That would be hell on earth.
With driverless trains
Driverless
might
trains.
be. They're on the way, aren't they? If
Driverless
the
tram.
RMT don't sort it out.
Oh, yeah, those are around now as well.
Yeah.
Flippin' fortune. Freddie, you want to talk about the Scottish trans laws in The Sun today? The gender law risks being abused.
Yes, this is, well, another sort of clash point between the Scottish Government and the British Government is Scottish Government's new identity laws, making it easier for people to change their gender publicly. The worry about this, the concern about this, and it's a justified concern, is that it means that violent male sexual offenders can pose as women. This is not just some sort of right-wing conspiracy theory. This does actually happen. And so the government are kind of drawing a battle line, the British government, Westminster, are drawing a battle line with the Scottish government over it. Nicola Sturgeon saying it undermines Scottish democracy. It's going to be a clash for the next few months.
But we've had this issue before because the British government intervened in Northern Ireland over abortion because abortion was supposed to be coming back and the deadlines kept being passed. And in the end, Westminster imposed it on Northern Ireland because they can do that on certain issues.
They can, under the Equalities Act.
Yeah.
They can claim supremacy. But then the Scottish government, which is very woke in its agenda, can say, you know, we're the elected government, this is not devolution. So it will be a...
But she's even lost ministers over this, Nicola Sturgeon, who resigned in protest.
It's not a popular policy.
Well, it's a ridiculous policy.
Yeah. I mean, allowing male
16?
rapists to pose as women.
Yeah,
and no medical checks.
There was a YouGov poll recently, wasn't there, that showed the percentage of the population who actually identify as trans, and it was like 0.1 or something.
As many as that?
And yet, I mean, I sound guilty now because I brought it up, but and yet how much time do we spend talking about it?
Well, exactly. That's what I mean. Disproportionate. Squeaky wheel always gets the oil. Golden Globes, Stephanie.
Yeah, Golden Globes were disappointing for the Brits. I love the Golden Globes because they usher award seasons for Hollywood and the showbiz industry. But the Brits, like some of our top stars like Olivia Colman...
She's won enough already.
No, you can always have one more gong in the...
You're not a fan, Andrew?
I am, but she seems to do everything.
Yeah, there are...
Everywhere.
OK, fine.
She does some really good roles, and her current film, Empire of Light, she does amazing, so I thought she was going to do really well.
Right.
I think what's kind of worrying about the Golden Globes is it's kind of a predictor of who's going to be picking up what in the Oscars, maybe the BAFTAs. I know with the BAFTAs, hopefully a lot more British talent will be recognised, but I think this, based on what happened at the Golden Globes, maybe the Oscars might not be a big thing for the Brits, but there's so many amazing talent, including Lily James, who missed out on Best Actress for her appearance in Pammy and Tom. But, you know, with the Golden Globes and all these award shows, it's always about who is the pick of the season, who they want to have a big one.
Kate Blanchett won, but didn't show up.
No, because she had her premiere in London yesterday for Tar. Amazing film.
She's going to win the Oscar for that, isn't she?
I think she will.
Just quickly, before we say goodbye to you, do either of you have puppies or dogs or...
I do.
Or did you have buyer's remorse?
No, best thing we've done, actually.
Ah, good. OK, well, you don't fit in...
having children?
Yes.
You're in trouble. You're in trouble, Freddie.
Many a true word spoken in jest. Freddie Gray, Stephanie Tetchy, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very, very much. Well, there you go. Not Freddie, but for many.
Gray, the arrival of a new furry family member is a moment filled with joy.
However, new research shows that over a third of dog owners say that they had puppy blues in the first few weeks of ownership.
70% of respondents in this survey said it even compared to bringing home a newborn baby. Let's speak to celebrity vet Dr. Scott Miller to tell us why.
Good morning to you. What's this all about?
Isabel, good morning, Andrew. I can't believe that he hasn't felt any puppy blues. I mean, you know, they're cute and cuddly and sweet, but they do some pretty horrendous things on people's carpets and chewing all sorts of possessions. I mean, surely at some point you might have questioned your decision making.
There's a little bit of frustration. I quite like it in the park. It's a Staffy, Staffordshire Bull Terrier, and in the park, a lot of sort of middle-class mummies find it very worrying.
But why? Because they think it's a Staffy.
They think it's going to tear their
Staffies are wonderful.
Yeah, they're the best.
Very
dog.
cute, but they are chewers, though. I mean, I'm sure that you've probably had a table leg or a mobile phone chewed at some point. I mean, they're very cute, but chewing is not cute.
I'll concede that. There's quite a lot of stuff gets chewed. Not a mobile phone, but
good.
We've certainly had some sofas chewed. And things.
So how long do the blues last?
Well, I mean, it can be a number of weeks to months. I mean, certainly there's many pet survey saying that 71% of people are considering that it's the same as a newborn baby. And I mean, as a father of 4, I can tell you that puppies can be just as challenging as babies. Thankfully, that period of time, that sort of toddler stage almost, lasts a lot shorter than it does in human babies. But, there are a lot of equal feelings of kind of, resentment of the change of your lifestyle. You've also got that, the stresses of not being able to sleep very well because of waking up at night. Obviously, we've already talked about the chewing. And then there's the toileting. I mean, I, at the moment, am the puppy parent of a gorgeous Bernedoodle puppy. She's 5 months old, Ludo, and she's gorgeous. But my goodness, she every night does like to pass a human head-sized poo behind the sofa whilst we're trying to watch television. And there's nothing cute about that. So that's why I feel like it's very important that the UK has a doggy doula like my good self to basically support you guys as you're finding that puppy parenting journey just that little bit more stressful than you imagined.
I wonder if the order of events helps. I don't know if, Freddie, you had children before you had the puppy, so therefore the puppy blue seemed inconsequential compared to children. Whereas a lot of people have a dog, don't they, in preparation for children, and that shock perhaps is greater in that instance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've also had some parents coming in where the husband's like, I'm going to give you a dog just so we don't have to have another human baby. So I think there's a balance between both of those. But like with children, I think it is just a massive sort of handbrake in your life. And there are some very sudden changes that maybe you don't realise. And if you haven't done your research to understand these sorts of issues, but also maybe not been clever enough to choose maybe the right breed for yourself as well, and also appreciating the costs involved. We all appreciate the cost of living crisis in the UK at the moment. And dogs are expensive. The vet bills are expensive. The food is expensive. There's loads of elements to living with a dog, which are pricey. And if you haven't looked into that, it does mean that many animals are now looking to rescue centres to rehome them. We don't want to see that. But at the same time, what I don't want is for people to be at home stressed that, why haven't I fallen in love with my dog straight away? And that sort of relationship does take time. And it's okay to sometimes think, what have I done?
What do you think of people who let the dog not only sleep on the bed, but in the bed?
Weird.
Well, look, Andrew, I tell you what, my wife and I have this constant argument. I think, in a way, it's probably to avoid a 5th child. And our dog now sleeps on our pillow in between the 2 of us.
What?
And I previously had not... I know, it's disgraceful. I apologize. Mrs. Miller, you're in trouble. But it is something that a lot of people do. And I think particularly Brits, you're all very naughty. And over here, the dog definitely is allowed in the bedroom, on the bed. I would say, look, it just really suits your particular lifestyle. I don't think there's a particular problem with it, although I would say is that if you do have a puppy, it's probably not a great idea because in the morning it might be a little bit moist and not in a good way.
Oh, gosh. Well, Andrew and I are both cat people. And Andrew said earlier you can avoid all of these puppy blues if you get a cat instead. But actually, kittens can be a bit of a pain when you first get them. They'll scratch, they'll also defecate.
6 months old.
Oh, then you miss out on the cute bit.
Because I wanted to miss out on the kitten blues.
But it's not just a dog thing, is it, is my point?
Yeah.
It's not. I would say, though, that cats come in a sort of a very sort of self-controlled package, in that they're sort of self-feeding, self-cleaning, self-exercising. They normally are really good with a litter tray. So, kittens sometimes, I think, as a sort of a starter sort of larger pet before you go for a dog is maybe not a bad idea. And I've got dogs and cats and tortoises and chickens and hamsters, as well as the 4 children. It's literally like Noah's Ark at my place. But, they all come with a degree of angst. And, alongside the joys of having these animals, the responsibility can be heavy. And I think this Many Pet surveys really shown that there are a lot of people suffering with puppy blues out there. And I think it's always best to just share that feeling, get it out of your system, speak to local experts, speak to dog trainers, speak to people in the park. And you might better be a little bit chippy. They might say, look, my dog, is getting me up 3 times a night. And you go, you know what, mine's only getting me up twice. So I'm in. I've had a win there.
There you go, top tips. You've put me off, if anything, but it's been fascinating to talk to you.
I'd rather have you put off. I'd rather have you put off than getting one and then it doesn't work out. But yes, but they are lovely, really.
OK, we got to go. Dr. Scott Miller, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Andrew and I are going to take a quick break. After that, we're back with Emily Thornberry. See you in a sec.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious, much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Rishi Sunak firing the unofficial start gun on his electoral campaign as he vows to restore pride in the United Kingdom in an address to the nation.
Good morning. It's 9 o'clock on Thursday, the 12th of January. This is Breakfast on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Isabel Webster.
And here's what's leading the news this morning.
I know this has been a tough winter. Our country faces some of the biggest challenges any of us will have seen in our lifetimes. With our economy, in our NHS, on our borders.
Rishi Sunak's pledge to tackle illegal migration and NHS waiting lists in his first party political broadcast as PM. He also touted his record on fighting inflation, but didn't mention the wave of strikes sweeping the country.
And MPs are demanding that the suspended backbencher Andrew Bridgen, he's a Conservative, should be banned from standing as an MP at the next general election after he compared the COVID vaccine rollout to the Holocaust.
Pregnant women and new mothers are being abandoned by the NHS. A new report has found the shocking findings by the Care Quality Commission reveal that 4 in 10 women struggled to get help from staff while giving birth.
And with food inflation continuing to soar, is eating more seasonal veg the key to saving money and the planet? We're going to talk to a couple flying the flag for British farming during that cost of living crisis.
And unfortunately for you, Andrew, that means eating Brussels sprouts.
Oh no, oh no.
Loads of you were getting in touch this morning. Thank you very much for your emails, for your tweets. Keep them coming in, and don't forget to mention where you're watching or listening from.
Our top story this morning, the PM setting out his aims for 2023 in a party political broadcast that appears to signal a shift onto an election footing.
Yes, Rishi Sunak reiterated his hard-headed, common-sense approach, to quote him, tackling both the NHS backlog and the economy. Let's have a listen.
Under my leadership, the government's priorities are your priorities, the people's priorities. Together, we're putting your needs above politics to repair the economy, strengthen our NHS, tackle illegal migration, and restore pride in the United Kingdom, our great country.
Well, joining us now for more analysis on this and the other big stories is the former Liberal Democrat Minister Norman Baker. You'd think one way to restore pride in Britain would be to address the absolutely crippling strike situation that is engulfing the country at the moment. No mention of that.
That broadcast could have been put together any time in the last 50 years, a statement about pride in the nation, cutting backlogs and so on. Nothing new about that at all. It was extremely wooden as well as a performance. I mean, was that the Prime Minister or was it an avatar? I wasn't quite sure looking at that. I mean, it was hopeless. It didn't inspire at all. And it was almost like a default broadcast of let's put some sentences together to try and hit the right buttons and leave it at that.
Well, apparently he recorded it some weeks ago. Why? I mean, it felt like it.
Yes, that's extraordinary. I mean, you expect broadcasts of that nature to be recorded the night before.
Well, particularly yesterday when they, for once, the government had something positive to say, in my view, in case they're finally bringing forward legislation to try to crack down on strikes and to ensure a minimum level of service. Your face is turning into a look of horror, Norman, as I talk about this, but a positive message because people can't go to work when the trains are on strike. That affects all sorts of other businesses, and we have these sort of laws all across the entire European Union, but not here.
Let me put it this way. If you're going to take a controversial position, which that is a controversial... Well, I think it is, but let me finish a sentence. Sure. If it's going to be controversial in some people's views, then what you need to do is sell it. And he's not been selling it. He's allowed it to sort of rise through the Commons gently, and he's gone on to something else about the values of the country and pride in the flag or something, which could have been said at any time. So he's failed to use the opportunity last night to promote the government's position on the current issue.
Although they were describing yesterday, I believe it was, I've lost track, or perhaps it was the day before, talking to Grant Shapps, the business secretary, calling it life and limb legislation, and that was to try and sell it to the public, who were extremely concerned that the ambulance drivers were going out on strike and that people would not be attended to during an emergency. And this would ensure a minimum level of service for nurses, for ambulance strike workers, for call handlers and all the rest.
We want to get to a situation, I'm sure all of us, where the strikes are ended. And there's a question to whether or not bludgeoning people into accepting legislation which is quite controversial is the right way, or whether traditional negotiations with the temperature lowered as a way to get to the right results. And I'm not quite sure the government's doing it the right way.
Can we ask you about the Conservative MP Andrew Bridgen? He's had the whip withdrawn, which means potentially he won't be able to stand as an MP at the next
election. As a Conservative MP.
A Conservative MP. Yeah. He compared the rollout of the vaccine rollout to the Holocaust. Now, I defend his right to criticise the vaccine rollout, but comparing it to the Holocaust, deeply offensive on any
Precisely,
level.
Andrew. I entirely agree with that view. People are entitled to their views on the vaccine, and they shouldn't be shut up if they've got genuine concerns about the safety of the vaccines. We're allowed to say what we think, hopefully, in this country, and on this channel, I might say. But in terms of the Holocaust, that's such an unparalleled episode of horror in the history of the world that you have to be really, really careful as a politician. You must know this to start invoking the Holocaust. I mean, you can't compare the Holocaust to anything. Maybe Pol Pot in Cambodia at a push, but nothing, well, nothing else, and certainly not vaccines.
And I think it's interesting that you talk about how you see more offence in the anti-Semitic language than in his conspiracy theories. I mean, obviously, I defend the right to free speech, and 100% nobody should be shut up for their thoughts in this country. But is there an argument that if what's being spread is unscientific and could cost lives, there should be caveats, there should be limits to that? I mean, what do you think about... just to quote the Chief Whip, Simon Hart, he said, the vaccine's the best defence we have. Misinformation costs lives. Matt Hancock saying the words he used were deeply offensive, anti-scientific and have no place in our House and wider society. And Sajid Javid saying he was dangerously wrong to imply the many good people who played their part in it are some kind of conspiracy.
Yes, and that's the answer. The people who take a different view, who are the majority, I suspect, have given the rebuttal. We don't get anywhere in society by shutting people up. You have to let them have their say. You know, I remember when that guy from the far right, I've forgotten his name now, from the BNP, was put on to Question Time.
Nick Griffin.
Nick Griffin, thank you. And people were saying how dreadful it was he was allowed space on Question Time. It was the best thing that could have happened. He was terrible.
But no one's saying Andrew Bridgen shouldn't be allowed to air his views, are they? They're just trying to say, be aware, this is anti-scientific, this is unscientific.
They've answered him. That's the way to deal with it. They've answered him. And as far as not standing against concerned, well, you know, as I understand the Conservative Party's rules, that's a matter for the Conservative Party local association to decide whether he stands or not, and then a matter ultimately for his voters to decide whether to vote for him. That's how it should be handled. We can't just ban people from standing on the basis of one thing they've said.
I bet you he doesn't stand at the next election.
No, I don't think he will.
Number 10 would be delighted to get rid of him because they see him as a troublemaker.
Yeah, but I'm sure.
But I think there should be troublemakers on the backbenches.
Yes, I've been one of them.
You were one of them. Then you became a minister and you went all soggy on us.
No, I didn't.
You did. A bit.
No, but I got quite a lot of controversial things through as a minister.
Norman Baker, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Let's introduce now the Shadow Attorney General, Emily Thornberry, who's standing by for us in Westminster. Good morning to you, Emily. Look, first of all, a thought on what we were just discussing there and Andrew Bridgen having the whip withdrawn. Do you think he should be allowed to stand again?
No, I personally think that the Tories should chuck him out of the party, but it's obviously a matter for them. They're not going to pay attention to my advice anyway.
OK, let's talk then about the anti-strike legislation that the government is proposing. Labour have been calling it all sorts of things, a sacking legislation that nurses would see themselves losing their jobs. But this works perfectly well across Europe.
How often is it actually used? Well, I think that's what's interesting. I think that there may be legislation across Europe, but it isn't actually used very much. Because the reality is that if you do use legislation like this, you are going to sack people who go on strike. Well, much better, surely, is to use the system that we already have, which is that people negotiate the basic safety levels, and you can see nurses running off picket lines in order to go and help when there is a particular crisis. That's the reality. That's what's always happened. And we know that even if they do pass this legislation, it's not going to help with the current situation. The current situation can only be helped if the government stops playing games, sits down and talks to the unions and negotiates a deal. They should have done it 6 months ago. The fact that we've left it until the very last minute, until attitudes have hardened, until people have actually gone on strike, until nurses have gone on strike for the very first time in their history, and now they want to negotiate, is obviously that much more difficult because, as I say, attitudes become harder.
You ask how often it's been used. Last year in France, Emily Thornberry, the French government intervened to stop a dispute at a refinery because it was having a major impact on the government. So it does get used. France is a civilised country, part of the European Union, so if they can use it, why can't the British government do the same?
Well, I think that the French system is not one that we have in this country. I think that their attitude to union relations is not the same as ours, and quite frankly, they've got a lot more strikes than we, well, used to anyway, have a lot more strikes than we have until the current impasse where the government haven't been prepared to get involved in solving some of these disputes.
You say the Conservative Party should get around the negotiating table. Oh, we've lost you there. We return, I believe, to the Shadow Attorney General, Emily Thornberry. I hope you can still hear us. Sorry, we lost you for a nanosecond there. You were saying that instead of this sort of legislation, the government should sit around the negotiating table. Well, they did do that. They invited all of the union leaders in on Monday. Those negotiations are ongoing. I want to hear from Labour, because they've refused to say so far what they would agree to pay, because at the moment the government's trying to look after the public purse and find a reasonable and affordable approach, given that we're expecting inflation to halve by the end of the year.
So the first thing I would say is this, I'm pleased to hear that the government is now sitting down with the unions. As I say, they really shouldn't have left it until the middle of January, until the fact that people have been on strike and attitudes had hardened. Much better to have sat down when the problems were obviously developing in the summer, and to have started negotiations at that stage and not allowed it to get out of hand. You know, during the whole time when we were in charge of the National Health Service, we didn't have strikes. Why didn't we have strikes? Because we sat down and talked to the unions and worked out the way to get through these matters. And of course, the strikes in the National Health Service aren't just about pay. They're also about working conditions, about the fact that we have a health service workforce that is exhausted and frankly tearful, and feel that, you know, no matter how hard they work, no matter how much they try, they just get by and they don't provide the sort of service that they want to be able to provide. So the problems are very deep-rooted and cannot be solved by one meeting with Rishi Sunak on Monday. However, what we would do is we would, as I say, not have allowed the situation to have got as bad as it has. And I don't know how much wiggle room the government has, because I don't have access to the books and to what the real scope for negotiations are. But we would have looked into it, and we wouldn't have said for months and months, we are not going to talk to you about pay. And even now, they seem to be saying, we're not going to talk to you about this year's pay, we're only going to talk to you about next year's pay. It seems to me to be a single-mindedness that is nothing more than unhelpful. And those that are suffering are the members of staff, but also the public who are affected by the strikes. And a competent and careful and appropriate government would never have allowed this to have happened.
Could I just ask you finally, Emily Thornberry, in the Commons yesterday, Labour MPs were criticising VAT, which private schools can claim through a charitable status. 1 in 7 Labour MPs went to private school. Why are you determined to take this benefit away when, in 13 years of a Labour government, neither Blair or Brown did any such thing?
I think that what we think is this, is that we should have excellent state schools that need to be properly funded. But at the moment we have, not only do we have underfunding in our state schools, but we have children who come to school who haven't had a breakfast and who come to school hungry and unable to learn. And on the other hand, we have private schools that we are all subsidising because they are not paying the sort of taxes that frankly they should be paying, and they're not paying full taxes because they're seen as charities. We would take away that status, and we would take away their access to being able to not pay VAT, and we would use that money for breakfast clubs for children who are not getting enough food.
But Emily Thornberry,
we need to be fair. That seems to me to be the sort of thing that any government should be doing, but certainly a Labour government will.
Sorry to interrupt you, but we are limited on time, and I just want to make the point, if you take away the charitable status, would you be happy then to see these private schools taking away the charity that they do, allowing their communities to use the resources, helping children that are on bursaries or scholarships or whatever that might be, so that people from all different backgrounds can benefit from that sort of education? And would you be happy to see school fees going up 7%, which means that a huge number of families who are just about managing being forced into the state sector at huge expense to the taxpayer? I mean, the Education Secretary yesterday saying that your plans were economically illiterate.
The school fees that are charged in the UK have huge variety, from relatively small amounts to more than the average wage is being paid for school fees. It'll be up to the schools to work out how they deal with having to pay VAT. But my priority is state schools and making sure that kids going to state schools are able to have something to eat. And I'm afraid that if you put it like that, I know which side I'm on.
Really good to get your thoughts this morning. Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry, thanks for your time this morning.
Now, Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, is in Northern Ireland today, the day after the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly visited Belfast for talks on the effect of that Northern Ireland protocol.
It follows a promising breakthrough in talks with the EU. Joining us now is GB News' Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie. Good morning to you. Look, it really feels as though there's some momentum building.
Well, you would think that, but if the talks were to get off to anything, you could have written a West End's play on this yesterday. Of course, James Cleverly arrived, the Foreign Secretary, and there's been a new government in the Republic of Ireland. Leo Varadkar has now taken over as the Taoiseach. So James Cleverly hadn't met his opposite number yet, so the political etiquette, and that said that he couldn't meet the leader of the opposition. Of course, that is Mary Lou McDonald of Sinn Féin, and she wanted into those talks yesterday, and that was denied. Sinn Féin then came out of those talks, didn't attend. The SDLP, the other nationalist party, came out as well. The Alliance Party then said about inclusion and that everybody had to be included. But of course, the SDLP and the Alliance Party yesterday were talking about changing the rules behind us here to exclude unionists so as that a speaker could be elected. Then we have Keir Starmer that has came along, and of course unionists aren't that happy with him because in June last year he went to Dublin first of all to find out what was happening there, then came to Belfast and then released his statement in the Irish Embassy in London, which baffled many political commentators of why he would do such a thing. So yesterday James Cleverly met with some business people here, and very well for us, Beth Lunny, who runs a garden centre, who we featured last year on Valentine's Day, and this is what she had to say.
We just can't get our plants from England the way we would like to. A few months ago, to get azaleas, camellias and rhododendrons from a lovely company in Nottingham, myself and 2 other garden centres had to go together and buy a full 40-foot lorry full of these plants and divide them between the 3 of us. That was the only way we could get them over because there's so much paperwork and the hauliers don't want to do groupage anymore. So if one of these other garden centres feel that they need more plants, they're going to have to wait until the 3 of us can put a full load together. So it means I can't just go and order a couple of trolleys of plants when I need them. I have to wait till we can buy them again between the 3 of us. He says he's meeting with Europe, he has ongoing meetings, but he says he understands our concerns, but I don't know that he maybe knows the solution, maybe he does, but he says that he'll work hard to try and get something that makes life easier for us trying to bring stuff from Great Britain, because we're suffering, but the growers in Great Britain are suffering as well.
Well, there you go. You could see from Beth Lunny that she is suffering and small businesses are suffering. And these talks are going to go ahead. Of course, they're trying to get ahead of that 19th of January deadline when Chris Heaton-Harris, the Secretary of State, will have to call an election or extend that legislation to keep the institutions from having another election. Because, of course, the Good Friday Agreement, the 25th anniversary of it, is coming up in April. And Joe Biden wants to attend to celebrate that agreement. But, of course, it's not running because of the protocol. It will be like a Christmas dinner, I would imagine, where there's been a family feud and everybody doesn't want to talk about the elephant in the room. So will there be much hope for these talks? Not immediately, I think.
OK, all right. Bursting the bubble there a little bit. But thank you very much, Dougie Beattie. Stay with us after the break. Carol Malone will be in the studio with us, going through the top stories of the day.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
And we're going to race through some of the today's top stories with one of my favourite journalists, the columnist Carol Malone, known to her mates as Malone.
I know.
Morning.
We've never called ourselves by our
No.
first names, have we? No. Anyway,
Now,
Penis.
Prince Harry, huge story, again.
Yeah, I mean, those stories in the papers today are saying that there's a huge reluctance and fear on the part of the senior royals, Anne and Edward particularly, who are saying that they don't really want them there because they're scared.
Well, at the coronation?
Well, at the coronation, because
Yeah.
they're scared he's going to turn it into a circus, and of course he will. I think the quote from inside the royals that said, "We don't want to be in the paperback," which I completely get. But it's interesting. I didn't know until today, when I was just reading some stuff, that there is a precedent for banning him because this is a state occasion as opposed to a family occasion. And when Elizabeth was crowned, Edward VIII was banned by Winston Churchill from that, which I hadn't realised.
The king who abdicated.
Yes, of course. So, yeah, people know that, Piers.
Not everyone.
You don't have to tell them that. So he was. Winston Churchill said, "This is a state occasion paid for by the people, and it's for the people." So
there's absolutely no way Rishi Sunak, who loves to sit on a fence,
you're so
will
right.
ever say that.
You're so right. I mean, I've listened to him. I mean, the stuff you've been playing today.
Useless broadcast last night, wasn't it?
He's like he's not like a leader. He's like a manager, isn't he?
I know.
He sounds like he should be in an accountant's office. He's not going to.
And he didn't mention the strikes, Carol.
I know. I can't believe that. I can't believe that. But anyway, that's the other thing that's getting my goat at the moment, the strikes. I mean, the ambulance workers yesterday. It's just like, it's shocking. I can't believe anyone who goes into the business of saving lives can walk out on those people and pretend like they're doing them a favour, that they're doing them some good by striking to get more money in their pay packets. The ambulance service is in a mess, but putting more money into paramedics' pay packets isn't going to solve that.
It might help to retain people, and that is the huge problem, isn't it? Within nursing, within paramedics, that it's not just about, the state of the NHS. It's about trying to keep people, because what will happen if it will implode if everybody leaves, which a lot of people are doing.
You say that, but I'm kind of looking at the attitude. I mean, what I can't get my head around is using the frailty and the sickness of vulnerable people to get more money. And I just, because the ambulance service exists to save lives, protect lives, and to alleviate suffering. And if you're gonna withdraw that, it's an archaic bludgeoning tool, don't you think, Piers?
Well, and I think it should be part of this strike legislation they brought forward yesterday to say there's got to be a certain level of cover, which the union would not guarantee yesterday.
And maybe it's not for every union, but certainly for healthcare.
Yeah, to fall into line with police and the army, perhaps the blue light services. There is that.
You can't have people who save lives walking out on sick people. I mean, I spoke to a paramedic this week, or should I say, argued with a paramedic this week.
Not you arguing.
Well,
so unlike you, Carol. So unlike you.
Well, because he's standing on the picket line saying their wages haven't gone up forever. Yes, they have. The paramedics are one of the few groups in the NHS that have had real terms pay increases.
They have.
Yeah, but this guy, actually said to me, he's talked like he was doing people a favour. And I said to him, how can, they've decided that people who have heart attacks, they will attend, but people who fall won't be looked at. Now, if you're 90 and you fall, that's a potentially life-threatening situation. And I'm thinking, how can you justify that to get more money? I just don't get it.
Unbelievably, we are out of time. That has absolutely raced past. It's been a pleasure to see you. Hopefully we'll get you back in on a Thursday morning. Yes. We'd love that. Listen, we have to leave it there. Carol Malone. Yeah, well done, Malone. Well done, Piers.
I'll be back tomorrow on Friday.
And I'll be back bright and early Monday morning. And up next, it's Tom Harwood with The Briefing. Have a lovely day.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain.